Oké, ik denk ik zal maar net weer afschakelen hier zo.
Speaker.
Masithandaze, Almighty God, where you have called us to govern this province. We ask your help to make decisions and laws that will be just and will promote the interests of our people. Onmachtige God, ons bid dat u gedrend ons vergadrens. Ons dien no dege weset sal gee en ons motieve Savior sal en dat u ons sal help om ons te kortkomingen te oorkom en al ons besluite aan u op te dra. Sikelela Nkosi ilizwe lethu nabantu balo. Misele Nkosi kulunga kwiphondo lethu. Nkosi sikelela iAfrika. Gcina abantwana bayo. Khokhela Nkosi inkokheli zayo. Inike uxolo Nkosi iAfrika. All this we beg in your most holy name. Amen. May all be seated. Honorable members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are back here together to consider the business of the day. I would like to draw your attention to the matters that are necessary, especially when we have hybrid sessions, and appreciating in the chamber the honorable members who are here, the Minister of Local Government and Environmental Planning and Development Planning, Minister Anton Budel, Vaya Tanki Menir, that here as he is, because it's nice that I don't sit alone here. It can be very lonely. Also, the Minister of Finance and Economic Opportunities. Thank you very much, Minister Menye, for joining me here. Honorable the Deputy Chief Whip of the Majority Party. Thank you very much, Advocate Bartman. Thank you very much, Honorable the Chair of the Standing Committee for Arts and Culture, Honorable Regan Allen. Thank you for your presence in the House here with me, the Leader of the Opposition. Thank you for representing your seats there, sir. It's always nice to have the members in the House with the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker, Honorable Dagmo, and of course the Honorable, the Leader of the ACTP, and the Chair and the Honorable Christians. Thank you very much, sir, for being here with me. Without further ado, I just want to encourage the honorable members as I welcome you all in the virtual platform that let us please observe the necessary decorum in terms of the instruments approved by us in terms of the rules, that we don't activate the microphone if you're not speaking. You also, if you can, please don't activate the camera if you're not speaking. And of course, the order, if you want to raise a point of order, you just indicate in the chat room, or also just raise your hand if you do have the raise hand button in your instrument. The members of the media, we always appreciate your presence as the members of the Fourth Estate, but please do not activate your cameras, do not activate your microphone, because you are in the gallery. Honorable members, that is the basic rules for virtual meetings. At this point, I just want to indicate that there is no load shedding that has been reported. So any member that is not in the House, we expect that you will be able to contribute without challenges of connectivity, failing which that will be for your own responsibility, but not the House as it stands. Honorable members, we now move to motions without notice. I would like to inform you, honorable members, that in terms of the new standing rules 150, the program authority had met on the 3rd of December and agreed on a set of motions. And I've been informed that political parties submitted the names in the desired order of speaking who would have wished to move a motion without notice in this sitting. And of course, I will therefore, just for noting and for the purposes of the minutes, call out the honorable members whose names have accordingly been submitted and approved by the Programming Authority. The following motions have been approved by the Programming Authority as follows, with the names of Honorable D. America, DA, Honorable Brankes, Al-Jamal, Honorable Van der Westhuizen, DA, Honorable Leke, ANC, Honorable Allen, DA, Honorable Bagubagu Force, ANC, Honorable Masego, DA, Honorable Mvimbi, ANC, Honorable Wenger, DA, Honorable Bosman, ANC. It's an interesting one, Honorable Bosman, ANC, Honorable Bosman, DA. Unless you're removing him, it's no longer floor crossing now. That thing ended. Honorable Allen, DA. So it's Honorable Bosman, ANC. There was a typo there. Honorable Bosman again, ANC. DA. So there's two motions in the order, and then Honorable Allen. That's the 12th one, honorable members. I now put the motions duly submitted and approved by the Programming Authority to the House. Are there any objections?
No.
No objections. Agreed to. The motions will appear in the minutes of proceedings in the handset and in each individual member's names as if they had read them here in the House. I will now afford the opportunity to the honourable members whose motions without notice as per Standing Committee Rule 150, subsection 3D. You will notice that there are members that may have submitted motions and they could not be included because there was no agreement in the Rules Committee, in the Programming Authority. And I've got two of those motions. The first one being the Honorable America. I recognize the Honorable America.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I will withdraw the motion. I will not read the motion in the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable America. The motion will be accordingly removed as such. Thank you. Now we move to Honorable Van Vogel, if you so wish to read your motion. Otherwise, it falls away.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, on behalf of the ANC, we move without notice that House note with pleasure and admiration the groundbreaking work of the South African scientists who last month identified a new coronavirus variant, the Omicron variant, which has the scientific name B11529, while congratulating them for fearlessly informing the country, world and scientific community about this new variant. The House wants to express its concern that several countries took punitive measures against Southern African countries, including South Africa, Botswana, and Zimbabwe, whose economies are bolstered by tourism without due consideration of the economic impact of these decisions. Therefore, the House calls on the United Kingdom and other countries that have closed their borders to visitors from South Africa and are also stopping their national from flying to South Africa to drop these harsh measures immediately. Also, the House wants to urge the South Africans who have not been vaccinated against the coronavirus to do so. I so move. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member Van Vogel. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being read without notice? Are there any objections to the motion itself? No objections. Agreed to. Thank you very much for that. Now I will ask the Secretary to read the first order.
Consideration of principle of the Western Cape Adjustment Appropriation Bill B6/2021.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Honorable members, in terms of the speakers list, I do have okay. Just bear with me. If everything works, you must thank the speaker. If something does not work, you must blame the secretary. All right, in terms of what is before me, the speakers list, it's the Minister of Finance. Mr. Secretary, please. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Honorable members, in terms of the speakers list, I now recognize the Honorable Minister of Finance. Minister.
Thank you, Speaker. 2 days ago, we tabled a budget to back you here in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, which is a budget to back you so that you find a job, a budget to back you so that you feel safe, a budget to back you so that you receive the care you need in the Western Cape. To back you, we outlined how resources will be allocated to sustain the fight against COVID-19, to support jobs, safety and well-being, to protect frontline services like education, health and social development, to rebalance the composition of expenditure, increase spending on infrastructure, to support effective and clean municipal government, to improve significantly spending, the efficiency of spending by driving value for money, to promoting transparency of spending on procurement, to mitigating risks, including drought, floods and fire. And finally, of course, to ensure the long-term fiscal sustainability of the Western Cape. We do so, of course, as I pointed out, despite significant budget crunches caused by national government, which has now become the biggest roadblock to economic growth and job creation in the Western Cape. When the new Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana, delivered his maiden medium-term budget policy statement on the 11th of November 2021, he pointed out that this, and I quote, "this was a crisis like no other, that would leave," and I quote again, "deep and long-lasting scars on the economy in South Africa," which of course is absolutely true. But the fact is, we were in deep economic trouble before the pandemic, and we are now in even deeper economic trouble in South Africa. We have stagnant economic growth. We have lockdowns, looting and load shedding. We have huge budget deficits, staggering national debt, and zombie state-owned enterprises gobbling up massive bailouts in South Africa. National government's brand should be starting delivery, stopping corruption. But of course, Speaker, it is exactly the reverse. It is starting corruption and stopping delivery in South Africa. To be specific, Speaker, we have stagnant economic growth, with the economy expected to grow at about 1.8% in 2022, 1.6% in 2023, and about 1.7% in 2024. We have staggering unemployment, with about 12.5 million people who do not have jobs or have given up looking for jobs in South Africa. We have huge fiscal deficits of 379.3 billion rand in 2022-23, 353.6 billion rand in 2023-24, and 348.8 billion rand in 2024-25. We have mind-boggling national debt of, wait for this, 4.7 trillion rand in 2022-23, 5.1 trillion rand in 2023-24, and 5.5 trillion rand in 2024-25. And to be clear, Speaker, to be clear, national debt does not include the 883 billion, not million, billion in debt accumulated by the 10 largest borrowing zombie state-owned enterprises, including Eskom, which means that we will be paying 303.1 billion rand in 2022-23, 334.6 billion rand in 2023-24, and 365.8 billion rand in 2024-25 in debt service costs, or over R1 trillion in debt service costs over the medium term in South Africa. To put this number in perspective, we will spend more on debt service costs in the next financial year than we will spend on policing, than we will spend on basic education, and that we will spend on social grants in South Africa. Let me say that again, Speaker. To put the number in perspective, we will spend more on debt service costs in the next financial year than we will spend on policing, on basic education, and social grants in South Africa, which explains why allocations to provinces over the medium term, about 658.4 billion in 2022-23, 647.2 billion in 2023-24, and 676.1 billion in 2024-25 are increasing at a rate well below inflation across South Africa. To make matters worse, spending pressures are huge and likely to materialize. Spending on compensation of employees, which over the medium term will consume an average of 668.8 billion rand every year. Spending on zombie state-owned enterprises, which over the medium term will consume an average of 73.4 billion rand in debt service costs per year over the medium term. And of course, more social assistance, which over the medium term will cost, I would imagine, an average of about 40 billion rand every year over the medium term in South Africa, which explains why there is such a significant budget crunch in provinces across South Africa. But despite that, Speaker, despite the budget crunch, we will, of course, in the first instance, sustain the fight against the pandemic by allocating an additional 211.3 million rand and positioning a further 800 million to be deployed at any time for any contingency in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic in the Western Cape. Again, Speaker, despite the budget crunch, we will also spend about 1.4 billion rand over the medium term on the ease of doing business, on boosting investment and exports, on enterprise development, on skills development, and of course on energy resilience, so that we can back you to find a job. We will spend about 2.2 billion rand over the medium term on more law enforcement officers, support to families at risk, providing safe spaces, and of course on gathering the relevant data to back you so that you feel safe. We'll also spend about 160 billion rand over the medium term on providing strong foundations, improving nutrition, mental wellness, and of course on after-school programs to back you so that you get the care that you need in the Western Cape. We also make provision for a net additional allocation of 1.49 billion in the 2021 adjustments budget. And despite the budget crunch, and here national government deserves credit, despite the budget crunch, we will spend an additional 603 million rand on employing general teachers and healthcare workers as a result of the additional allocation from the Presidential Youth Initiative, which will go a long way to give people, especially young people, hope in the Western Cape. Speaker, we tabled a budget to back you, above all, so that we could back you and so that you had hope in the Western Cape. Of course, what we'll do more than anything to restore hope, especially to the tourism and hospitality sector, is for the international community to lift the travel bans, which they know are ineffective and which they know are killing jobs in the Western Cape. To quote a number of eminent scientists in a recent article published in an influential scientific journal, The Lancet, which was published on the 3rd of December 2021, and I think it's worth quoting them again. They said that by their nature, SARS-CoV-2 variants are several steps ahead of the international travel curve. Once community transmission of an airborne virus is occurring, as it is, travel restrictions have little effect. To avoid, Speaker, further lockdowns, we must, of course, ensure that we vaccinate as many people as fast as possible in the Western Cape. We have delivered about 4.2 million vaccinations, and about 45% of adults are now fully vaccinated in the Western Cape, which is good, but it is not good enough. And we hope that you go out and get vaccinated and help us to do what we can to save the summer season in the Western Cape. Speaker, in conclusion, we, as I've said before, have been hit hard and we have been knocked down, but we have not been knocked out. We must now stand up, we must brush ourselves off, and we must fight on so that we move forward in the Western Cape. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, the next speaker is the Honorable Member Mkondlo.
Thank you. Honorable Speaker. Honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, let us just remind the Minister that the concept of a budget to back you cannot just be a thumbs up, wishful thinking, but should or must be a scientifically and reliable state backed by evidence of what, as a claimant, is your performance record, let alone the realities from these assumptions being made where we move from. And therefore, as the ANC, we express our rejection of this 2021 MTBPS framed on a DA elitist-based development approach that rather keeps this province as a mirror of its old state as a Cape colony. I then rise on behalf of the African National Congress to reiterate our position not to support this medium-term budget policy statement. Firstly, in doing so, we would like to expose the DA hypocrisy for rejecting just the other week the division of revenue on the basis of insufficient time provided for public participation, while they themselves have no record to claim any better. The minister tabled quarterly performance, which had to be removed from the agenda for another day, made reference to Mero in his speech on MTBPS, and all this done as a one-day tournament with no public participation enabled. Secondly, the MTBPS was tabled during the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, yet the budget speech was silent on GBV and femicide and its economic impact in the province, let alone the GBV data reporting. Once again, they lamented as a basis to reject the DORA, and once again another claim to fame on this area here in the province, wherein just in February this year, Minister Fritz was reporting the province as accounting for 26.2% of domestic related crimes in the country, as per the national crime stats released by SEPS. While the Western Cape is battling the persistent chronic conditions of high unemployment affecting mainly young people, abject poverty, mainly affecting Black majority and Africans in particular, low economic growth and inequality, as well as lack of basic services, especially for those in informal settlements. I have no doubt in mind that the MEC and his team gave no thought to addressing these conditions when they prepared this budget under the theme, a budget backed for you and other government plans. We need a rethink of the fiscal policy direction post-COVID, and we ought to move towards pro-poor budgeting to bring in increased government spending to alleviate poverty and inequality, with deliberate projects aimed at inclusive economic growth that drives equitable distribution of economic resources. A total departure from the old. What exactly is the fiscal future that is in the provincial treasury doing? We would be asking that particular question. The so-called budget to back you, tabled by the minister, does not offer hope, as it's oblivion to the true state of this glossy province that all of us few weeks ago, as colleagues in this house, we were reminded of as we walked the streets campaigning for votes for our parties. These are not cooked or choreographed realities of many in our townships that are staying with sewer right up to their homes and right up to their gates. There is extensive evidence on these challenges. The recent Pero in September and the Mero that was tabled from Monday and yesterday debated as guiding documents of this government's disposal with in-depth analysis on these issues. However, Speaker, last year when the MEC tabled both the Pero and Mero, we raised very sharply our criticism that these documents do not in any way analyze the ownership patterns of the provincial, regional, and municipal economies in terms of race and gender. This would allow the legislature to analyze the extent of transformation in key sectors of our economy, such as agriculture, tourism, the ICT, renewables, and others. At that meeting, the MEC agreed to consider this. Yet this week, Mero was tabled with no reference at all to the ownership patterns of the local economy. When we questioned this in the committee, the department's response was that they did ask municipalities, but did not receive many responses. Here, we are not talking simply about procurement patterns by municipalities. We're talking about the ownership of each sector of the economy, irrespective of whether these companies procure work from the state or not. The fact that this was ignored confirms our long-held view that the DA refuses to confront the racist ownership patterns of these provincial and local economies. When we talk of prosperity, this is nothing else but the race denialism by the DA. We shall be saved as we welcome the report of the Competition Commission that was released yesterday of who owns the economy, and hope that we shall be able to discuss this in this parliament. The impact of COVID-19 has been felt across all aspects of life, be it in people's health and their livelihoods. Our triple challenges have not disappeared, but were compounded further in unimaginable proportions by the COVID-19. The official unemployment rate in the Western Cape increased from 21.6% in Q3 2020 to 26.3% in Q3 2021, a whopping 4.7%. The expanded unemployment rate of the province is 30.3%. The 2021 Pero highlighted the vulnerability of youth in the labor market, as it pointed out that in the first quarter of 2021, the youth contributed almost 60% of all unemployment. This raises the need for targeted interventions for youth employment and development. The provincial government is clueless on how to address the crisis of youth unemployment, let alone youth development in general. It closed down the Youth Commission and abandoned all its policies and plans of youth development without putting in place anything to replace them. This is a self-orchestrated chaos and man-made crisis. Where unemployment is concerned, the MEC turns around and applaud the ANC-led national government and its presidential youth initiative, which he said would give thousands of people, especially young people, work opportunities and hope in the Western Cape. We welcome the 603 million investment into the province for the Presidential Youth Initiative to employ general school assistants, healthcare workers, and social workers. We also welcome the additional 1.1 billion towards the public sector wage agreement. Whilst as the ANC, we further raised the issue of the short-termist approach, in particular on the youth interventions, which is an issue that we continuously take up both with national government and we raise also with the committees that have received the allocations. The medium-term budget policy statement is very silent on the details of the social support program in response to the poverty pandemic that is ravaging many households in the province. Seemingly, there is no government response to the exceedingly high rates of poverty and unemployment. There was no mention of any humanitarian relief programs. All that we know is that the government plans to spend 82% of its budget on social wage. This is simply not enough and exposes how uncaring the regime is. It is puzzling why the provincial government decided to ring-fence 800 million in the provincial reserve to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic when there is a clear need to expend some of these funds on humanitarian relief. We call on the ANC government to speed up the process of the finalization and implementation of the universal basic income grant. In closing, Speaker, the MEC brags about 67.3% of all Western Cape COVID-19 related expenditure being spent on SMMEs. Whilst this is commendable, we called on the MEC to further disclose how many of these were BEE compliant. The Western Cape refused to implement the prescript of the BBBE Act as it wants to continue enriching white companies. The need for increased support to the informal traders has also been ignored. This is a budget to back some, not all, as it will clearly leave the majority living in squalor and languishing in poverty. A budget to back the majority of people would be the one that does not overlook the stark realities of extreme wealth and income disparities, unequal access to economic opportunities, and spatially rooted poverty in the Western Cape. I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Kondlo. Honorable members, the next contributor is Honorable Bartman. She's here in the chamber. Honorable Bartman.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, fellow South Africans. The Western Cape Province, in response to the pandemic, developed a recovery plan focusing on job, safety and dignity of our people, and in order to lay a foundation for long-run economic growth and poverty reduction. Speaker, it is the Western Cape government's ability to adapt and become more agile in a constantly changing environment that makes the Western Cape government the best government in our country. And Speaker, I did read the public disclosure report, and the BBBE percentage was in it. It was actually part of the percentage reporting underneath the SMMEs, and it was well above 60% of the procurement in the Western Cape was on BBBE companies in terms of our COVID procurement. Speaker, in keeping to our commitment to SMMEs, the Western Cape government supported small, medium and micro businesses through our SMME Booster Fund further, which supported 17 organizations, which in turn supported 397 SMMEs, creating 90 jobs through 4 organizations that have completed these SMME Booster Funds, and another 300 jobs are envisioned through the remaining 13 organizations. The Department of Economic Development went further and linked 122 spaza shops with community kitchens to help both communities and businesses weather the worst of the lockdown regulations. The Community Economic Recovery Project allowed community kitchens to redeem vouchers to purchase food supplies and helped feed approximately 22,500 beneficiaries in the Western Cape. And the same department assisted with converting 2 existing spaza shops within Langa into independently owned mini supermarkets, and another 2 stores in Delft and Paarl East created 91 jobs. Speaker, earlier, energy is the bedrock of our economy, and for this reason, it is the Western Cape did not wait for the respective bid windows to open. We launched a request for information and received 82 submissions. 62 of these were found to be potentially viable and relevant and had the potential to generate nominally more than 4,800 megawatts. Of these, 12% or 590 megawatts of projects seems capable of reaching commercial operation within 12 months, while 75%, which is nearly 3,600 megawatts of projects, indicated commercialization within 2 years from signing a power purchase agreement. Speaker, to put this in context, in terms of South Africa, the average household consumption of energy is 30 kilowatts per hour in terms of energy per day. Now, if you use the 3,600 megawatts, then that is essentially the equivalent of powering 120,000 households for 1 day. This is more than the households combined in the Overberg and Central Karoo districts with energy to spare. In terms of the request for information, it is what has informed the establishment of the Municipal Energy Resilience Project with municipalities. And in keeping to that commitment to working towards ending load shedding, this project has partnered with 6 municipalities and the City of Cape Town in order to support them to procure energy and break the shackles of Eskom. Detailed technical work has taken place on these projects in terms of assessing various renewable energy scales, technologies, procurement and contracting models, finance and regulatory requirements. We thus welcome the announcement by the Minister in the adjusted budget that the funding for this project will not be lost and has already been approved for rollover for the next year to ensure that the respective municipalities are still able to access the funding. We know that deep technical matters such as this take time, but we welcome the fact that these funds will assist with research-intensive documents, which are expensive, such as the electricity master plans and cost of supply studies, so that when the procurement commences, the decisions are data-led. Further, 4 declarations of green economy investment in the Western Cape have been supported by the Western Cape government, signed and completed in the past 2020-2021 financial year, amounting to a total investment of 11.6 billion rand. And the Atlanta Special Economic Zone will continue to prioritize green technology investment. But Speaker, we do not have much time left. We have half a year left in order to get the ASEZ listed as a 3D company. The Western Cape has dotted their I's and crossed their T's, but the last step is for the National Minister of Finance to sign off on the documentation. For months, our government has been hounding national government on the matter, but national government continues to fail our people. Yesterday, the news came that all is left is for this Minister of Finance in the national government to sign off on the process, and we urgently call for the Minister to cut the red tape and sign off on the ASEZ license. The Western Cape already has 60% of South Africa's utility scale project developments and 70% of South Africa's renewable energy manufacturing situated in this province. And it was already the leading province when it comes to supportive regulatory environment for rooftop PV solar energy, with to date 23 local municipalities in our province, as well as the city of Cape Town, already enabling private rooftop PV connections to the grid, with 19 of the municipalities already having nationally approved feed-in tariffs, enabling households and businesses to be financially compensated for excess energy fed into the grid. And our government continues to engage businesses to promote the installation of solar PV on their premises. This means that every household in the respective municipalities will have the choice to become an energy generator and an energy entrepreneur. And in this regard, Speaker, I would like to call upon the National Minister of Finance to table tax incentives for the capital injection that goes into the original installation of a PV system on your roof. And we call upon the Banking Association of South Africa to lobby the respective commercial banks in order to allow people to include the original installation of solar PV system into their home and business bond applications. In real terms, 8.4 billion rand will be cut from our budget over the medium term. And what we need is an affordable solutions which don't compromise service delivery of our departments, which is why the Western Cape established the Fiscal Transition Support Facility, which seeks cost-effective measures while also cushioning departments on large cuts to their budgets. As part of the 2021 budget process, the Provincial Treasury allocated 248.57 million rand within the provincial reserves for this facility in the 2021 MTEF. Because the Western Cape cares about the digital economy, transparency and value for money, 2 million rand has been allocated to the Provincial Treasury in this facility for an e-procurement solution. Because the Western Cape cares about your well-being, we have allocated 10 million rand to the Department of Health in this facility for their telehealth program. Because the Western Cape cares about older persons and their mobility, we have allocated 99 million rand to the Department of Health in this facility for home delivery of chronic medication so that you do not stand day in and day out in long queues. Because the Western Cape cares about the ending of load shedding in our province, we have allocated 5 million rand in this facility to the Department of Agriculture for on-site battery infrastructure for energy storage. And because the Western Cape cares about research, education, and preserving historical information for future generations and improving access for all people, we have allocated 1.35 million rand in this facility to the Department of Cultural Affairs and Sport for the digitization of the archives website. Speaker, the Western Cape is committed to jobs, and in order to create an environment that creates jobs, we are committed to supporting small businesses recover and ending load shedding in our province. The time has come for our people to take back their power. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Barthman. Honorable members, I now recognize Honorable Makamba Boche.
Enkosi Somlomo. Speaker, the 2021 Western Cape allocation of funds and the appropriation bill does not inspire confidence to the people of the Western Cape. This is concerning because the budget fails to address some of the deep-rooted problems and challenges that our people continue to experience on a daily basis. Speaker, the Western Cape government, through the Department of Economic Development, is not doing enough to support the SMMEs, especially in the Black communities and the townships. The Pick and Pay Spaza Shop project and other small initiatives initiated by the department only reach a very small segment of people. In order to empower our people, Speaker, especially the poor, we then need to come up with the solutions that can be applied at a greater scale so that our people can also sustain themselves. We are always being told that Western Cape creates employment, like the previous speaker said, employment opportunities through private sector partnerships, but the truth of the matter is that the bulk of these jobs do not even pay decent salaries. The money is only good enough for an employee to pay transport and rent, then they are broke again. When it comes to agriculture, Speaker, money should be allocated and used for progressive projects which will empower previously disadvantaged people. The provincial government should make more agricultural land available and allocate such parcels of lands to small emerging Black farmers so that they can also be empowered and compete in an industry where they were previously excluded, because the 1.8 million additional allocation is not enough for such a purpose. Speaker, when it comes to housing, an additional allocation of 57 million is shocking. The need for housing continues to increase, whilst efforts to address housing shortages by the provincial government remains futile. This is an ongoing concern and it is worrying. Moreover, this government is not doing enough in its effort to alleviate poverty. An additional budget of 63.1 million to social development is not enough to make sure that homeless people stop eating from garbage bins and that they are provided with adequate shelters where they will be safe and healthy. As a matter of fact, Speaker, this government does not take homeless people seriously. These people are vulnerable in society and they need care and protection from government. Money allocated to health sector is also not enough to make sure that the province has 24-hour operating clinics which are close to the people, especially in the areas where these services are in demand, such as in townships. Clinics in the province do not even have power generators. So every time when there is a load shedding, everything comes to a standstill, with patients being turned back and told that they should come back some other time. Speaker, moreover, I find it shocking that there is 9.7 million budget cut from the Community Safety Department. What makes matters worse is we all know that Western Cape is the main hub of crime in the country. We also know by now that the so-called safety plan introduced by the Premier is failing. The law enforcement advancement plan together with the safety ambassador project are nothing but a waste of money as they do not produce any results. Inkosi Sonlong.
Siyabulela manqofu. Inkosi kakhulu. Honorable members, I now recognize the Honorable Minister Schaefer.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Speaker, on Monday and this again just now, the Provincial Finance Minister spoke of the serious budget crunch our province is facing. Our provincial share has taken a beating. The national economic outlook is dismal, reflecting in yesterday's publication of the GDP contracting by 1.5% in the third quarter. And just as we seem to see a lull in the pandemic, Omicron and the world's knee-jerk reaction to it has delivered another blow to our economy. Despite all this, the Western Cape government is continuing to deliver excellent services under enormous pressure. I want to really congratulate all our staff in the province for what they do every day, but especially what they've done over the last 2 years. But the unfortunate reality is that things will not be looking up anytime soon on the fiscal front. While we have a budget to back the people of the Western Cape, the ANC national government is only interested in budgets to line their own pockets. They can't even manage their own finances properly. And there are zero consequences. In October, South Africa was given 18 months by the Financial Action Task Force to get our act together in tracing and prosecuting money laundering and terrorist financing, or face being grey listed, with the risk of further credit downgrades if we don't, if that's even possible to do. As long as the looting continues and the ANC continues with its anti-investment policies, we will be faced with ever harsher cuts to our budget share in real terms. So it is not really surprising that the frustrated ANC and its allies in the Western Cape need to grasp at straws to try and find something bad about the only provincial or national government in the country that is giving hope to South Africans. My department is continually the subject of the strategy.
Honorable Minister. If you
Yes.
could please pause. There is a point of order from Honorable Said. Your time is paused as well. Honorable Said, what's your point of order?
Honorable Speaker, is the MEC able to take a question on the coalition with the EFF and Good in the province?
No, sorry, no time.
Thank you, Honorable Said. The Minister has now just responded. Minister, you may please proceed.
Thank you, Speaker. My department is continually the subject of this strategy, with the opposition trying to create the impression, with the eager assistance of some media, that we have wads of spare cash lying around that we are either misspending or giving away. Yet, if you test each of these claims, they come up far short of the pass mark. So here are a few lessons, which I'm sure will not make it into the media, but will at least be on record here where it matters. Memberside's favorite villain of late is the WCED head office. Previous office buildings we occupied were not suited to access for vulnerable groups. We had pensioners queuing for service benefits assistance in a crowded shopping center. Our staff too were not safe. One of the existing 2 buildings the staff were spread across was not compliant with safety standards and constituted an unhealthy and unproductive work environment. It was the subject of union discussions year in and year out, and rightly so. We urgently needed to move to a safe, inviting, and fit for purpose building, and we're fortunate to eventually find one large enough to do so. But Memberside doesn't seem to think that the learners, parents, teachers, and pensioners who visit our head office, not to mention the staff who work there every day, deserve to be safely accommodated. Instead, he has created a false campaign of an alleged R1 billion lease for 10 years. Now, I appreciate that math can be a bit difficult, but an annual rental of 49 million times 10 years does not get you anywhere near R1 billion. But here's the kicker. The amount of rent we are paying is cheaper than the buildings we were in previously. So the ANC is attacking us for providing a safe environment for our stakeholders and our staff, and for saving money while doing so. Speaker, I must wonder about the motives behind this narrative. I also must wonder where exactly
On a point of order, Chair.
Honorable Minister, if you could please take your seat. Honorable members, we do not do it like that. Honorable Said, we remember we've been doing this now for the longest time. You raise your hand or indicate in the chat room, but you don't go ahead and speak because it creates a bit of a challenge. I have, Honorable Minister, muted, paused the watch. I've got 2 hands here. Honorable Said, you go first on a point of order, and then followed by Honorable Nkondla.
Chair, on a point of order, the Honorable MEC is casting aspersions on a member in the House for merely raising issues. She's also misleading the House, because the question I raised was about her own office, not the department's office, but that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Said. I'm going to look at that. What is the point? Let us deal with this point of order and dispense with it. Honorable Minister, did you refer to the member in the House?
Speaker, I referred to something that he's been saying in the public media, and I do find this rather unusual process where members can interrupt our speeches like this.
All right. Honorable Minister, in terms of our standing rules, and going to refer you to Rule 60. I'm going to refer you to the particular rule that guides that, because the honorable member reads the rule, but it didn't mention the specific rule, but it's okay. In terms of the minister and what you have said, I'm sure you've acknowledged that. But what you may not do in terms of rule, okay. Just give me a minute, Minister. We're running a house here following standing rules, and I want to mention the specific one, unless Member Said was aware which rule he was raising. But the matter is substantiated. I also see the Honorable Minister was referring to it. without necessarily indicating whether you think it is order or disorderly. But what I would like to help us is that, as we've always maintained, we would rather make sure that the decorum of the House does not get compromised by casting aspersions on members if the Honourable Minister has indeed done so. And you follow the process of a substantive motion. If you were to mention a member, you do have that prerogative and the provision in terms of the rules. I also see other members raising hands, but if it's on the different matter, we'll have to deal with this matter first, unless it is on the same matter. Honourable Nkondlo and Honourable Wenger.
No, thank you, Speaker. I'm covered by your ruling because I think I was going to raise the same issue. So I'm covered by your ruling. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Nkondlo. Honourable the Chief Whip, Wenger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister is responding to criticisms from the Honourable side. So I don't know how they can be construed as imputing improper motives or improperly reflecting on the member when she's merely responding to his very own criticisms, which is something that one would expect in a debate of this nature, which is political in nature, as we know the second reading debates are. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Chief Whip. Yeah, I think it's going to be a challenging one if we were to allow that, because we've never allowed that in the past, where if a member is in the House, is part of the is part of this Parliament, he may not be subjected to some form of criticism which may impugn on his person without following a particular rule. I think Chief Whip, you must help me. Also, the Deputy Chief Whip is in the House, and the Chief Whip of and the Deputy Chief Whip of the ACA and the Deputy Chief of the ANC. You must help me run this House properly. Otherwise, I will have to leave this matter for the next foreseeable opportunity to deal with it and allow the Minister to proceed for now. So the Minister will proceed. I will deal with this matter before we adjourn the session. Honourable Minister, please proceed, and there's no further point of order on the matter.
Thank you, Chairperson. If it would assist you, I would say the ANC is attacking us. I also must wonder where exactly they would prefer our staff to work. In the street, perhaps? Just because the ANC can't pay its own costs and their staff, maybe they will have to work on the street, but that does not mean that the DA government will do that to our staff, because we care for our staff. This inability to calculate continues when it comes to their response to our annual report. The ANC has claimed that we returned the bulk of underspending to Treasury. The truth is that we returned only 44 million rand. As a result largely of COVID-19 disrupting some departmental programs, as it has around the world, by the way, which is 0.18% of last year's budget. Other money that was underspent in the last financial year has been rolled over. In fact, the slightly delayed infrastructure projects because of delays in the construction industry and process had already been completed when the annual report was discussed. The narrative of huge amounts of funding being given back is just false. So is the claim that under expenditure that we did incur could have been spent on building schools. In terms of conditional grants, the clue is in the name, conditional. For the ANC to suggest that we irregularly divert this to other spending is concerning, to say the least, and would have been a real ground to criticize us. The same false narrative of losing funds has reared its head during the current budget cycle, with the ANC-aligned Good Party saying we have lost vast sums of infrastructure money. We haven't, and I'd urge member from the party to do his homework before making such claims. Faced with extreme pressure from increasing learner numbers, budget uncertainty, and problems within the construction industry, we've had to change our approach to infrastructure development and maintenance. We are targeting new school builds and smaller capital projects, school repair work, and preventative maintenance over the next 2 years. Despite this reprioritization, we still will be providing the new schools and hundreds of additional classrooms we need to place the additional learners joining our school system next year. Our schools, along with officials and head office and the districts, are working long, hard hours to find a space for every child. As I've mentioned many times before, schools will only finalize their placement lists once progression and promotion is finalized in the coming week or so, at which point I will make an announcement about unplaced learner numbers, which are already considerably lower than the reported 29,000, not to mention the reported 121,000 unplaced in Gauteng. The last lesson I need to school the members of the opposition about is the school's evaluation authority. Again, the ANC claims that it is a duplicate and unnecessary function when there is no other independent evaluation authority in our country. Surely they cannot be referring to NEDU, which hasn't released an evaluation report since 2014 and never won on individual school performance. In stark contrast, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, the ACA has completed 111 evaluations in less than 2 years and published the school-specific reports for public access. These evaluations and reports provide valuable feedback to our schools, department, parents, and the wider school community, and revealed some amazing best practices for other schools to learn from, which we could all do well to look at. Now that we've sent the opposition back to school, Speaker, let's get back to the reality our province faces. The outlook is bleak, but the Western Cape is providing the hope that our country so desperately needs, and we will continue the fight where it is needed so that we move forward in the Western Cape. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable members, as I indicated, I will provide a ruling on the other matter in the foreseeable opportunity, the earliest opportunity, hopefully before we adjourn, but otherwise it will be as soon as possible. May I then thank you, the Honourable Minister, and now request the Honourable Heron to address the House.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, over the past year, the Western Cape government has unveiled a budget to bounce back, a Western Cape recovery plan to bounce up, and now a budget to back you. Someone should tell the MEC that you can't put lipstick on a pig. He should take the residents into his confidence and explain some of the fine print. For example, was it due to incompetence that the province failed to spend nearly 1 billion rand set aside for infrastructure development in this period, in which it claimed to be prioritizing infrastructure development? It makes no sense. Surely spending this money, creating jobs in the construction sector, instead of returning it to the fiscus, would have had far greater bounce back ability. The Western Cape government is not a PR agency. The people of this province can't eat catchy phrases and breathless announcements. This is why they are hungry and unemployed. They rely on the actual nuts and bolts, on actual implementation. A coherent 2021 adjustment budget, underpinned by truth and transparency, would reveal where the 2020 bounce back budget and the 2021 bounce up recovery plan are having real impact and seek to build on that momentum. But these plans are incoherent. The recovery plan commits government to fast-track infrastructure projects and address some of the fundamentals constraining economic growth and job creation. It promises to stimulate the economy by boosting infrastructure investment and job creation in the public sector. But this adjustments budget surrenders 650 million rand intended to be spent on infrastructure before March 2022. The Transport and Public Works Department has abandoned about 360 million rand for large roads and other building projects. And despite what the MEC says, the Education Department has surrendered 290 million rand originally allocated for infrastructure development. On top of these 650 million rand losses, the 2020 adjustment budget saw the Transport and Public Works Department surrender 200 million rand from infrastructure projects and transfer 90 million rand from infrastructure projects due to slow spending to non-infrastructure items. Speaker, that's almost R1 billion that this government has failed to spend on its infrastructure-driven growth plan in just one calendar year. The MEC must explain the point of fancy budget speeches if he and his co-chair leaders don't have the skills to actually spend the money. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Heron. Honourable members, I now recognize the Honourable Minister Fritz.
Speaker, I rise to announce the Department of Community Safety's 13th clean audit what an achievement, because, you know, all your enemies don't want you to deliver and they're looking for you to get a qualification. So just that point, I just want to start off by making that point. Speaker, with due regard to the many challenges we still face in making the province safer for all our citizens, especially the poorest of the poor, I rise to say that we have made massive progress in implementing the architecture of the provincial safety plan, notwithstanding whatever all these other misfits are saying. Under the leadership of our HOD and the management team, we have revised the APPs and realigned our departmental programs to ensure that we can deliver. Mr. Speaker, I am also...
Honorable Minister, will you please take your seat? I've paused the timer. There is a point of order by Honorable Said. Honorable Said, what's your point of order?
Honorable Speaker, is it parliamentary for the Honorable respected MEC to refer to members of the House as misfits? I don't think that's parliamentary. Thank you.
It is rude.
Order, honorable members. Do you want to restate what you've just said, Honorable Said, of referring to honorable members as what?
As misfits. The word he used now is misfits. I think he must rather just focus on the content of his input. Thank you.
Let me make a ruling on this one immediately. We are in a political debate. And if you do not refer to a particular member, it may not necessarily apply in that sense. Whatever the connotation is, I don't think it is offensive. Do you want to define what that is for the House?
Are you asking me, Mr. Speaker?
Let us proceed. I wanted to understand how offensive is that, Honorable Said. You want to explain yourself?
Chair, Speaker, thank you. A misfit in the social context, particularly given that we're having members of the public listening. A misfit is somebody who just doesn't fit in. Doesn't fit in society, doesn't fit in somewhere. It's got a deeply negative connotation.
Thank you.
But it's fine. I mean, if you have ruled, it's.
Thank you, Honorable Said. Yeah, we'll check whether Oxford is that. I'm learning. Thank you for educating all of us. Before I go back to the Honorable Minister, Fritz, I see there's a couple of other hands. Honorable Wenger, Honorable Chief Whip Wenger, Honorable Bosman, are you on the same matter? Honorable Heron is also here. Honorable Nkondlo, are you all rising on the same matter?
Mine is slightly different, Honourable Speaker.
Oh, slightly different one. All right.
May I proceed?
We need to deal with this one and dispense with it.
It is related, but I'll take your direction.
All right. I've made a ruling on this one that there is nothing untoward about that. I think I don't want to. I want to be as stricter in terms of the rules as possible without really being prescriptive and trying to circumscribe the political ability for members to express themselves. I think it's one way to talk about the rules and members breaking them, but it's one way of trying to limit the freedom of speech in the debate like this one. So I'm trying to listen as best as possible, and you must help me. I like the chief whips and the deputy chief whips helping me, but let us also allow free speech as long as it does not infringe on Rule 59. Let us cut that. I think it's one thing that we need to make sure, as well as Rule 62 in this case. May I then allow the next point of order? I've dispensed with this one that was raised by Honorable Said, and he understands that. May I then move to Honorable Chief Whip Wenger? What is the point of order that you're raising on?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While some of the comments were made generally about members without being specific about which member they were referring to, one of the members from the opposition benches called the minister rude directly. She said he is rude. And I'd like you to determine whether that could be construed as reflecting improperly on the integrity of the minister. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure, is this how you want to end the year? Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. I wonder who said that. Do you know who said that? Because
I couldn't say for certain, Honourable Speaker, but perhaps you could consult the Hansard.
we will consult we'll look at the transcript and see who may have said that. I think the best thing is to really, whatever the frustration or whatever the views you may hold on a member, to ensure that we do so within the code of conduct, and of course to ensure that we do so following the standing rules, and that we are respectful as honorable members towards one another. So that is a subject for another day, because I've understood over time that sometimes members do take these rules for granted, but it must not be allowed. May I say on that matter, Chief Whip, I've ruled in that order that will come back based on the Hansard and then make a ruling at the time. I'm going to request the Honorable Bosman. He seems to have raised his hand. Will you please come forward, Mr. Honorable Bosman?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I think Member Syed needs to be called to order for misleading the House because he gives us incorrect definitions. But I do want you to rule on Member Syed abusing Rule 40 by constantly interrupting members. And in that regard, I do think he does fit the definition of a misfit as it is in the dictionary, because he doesn't seem to be fitting in with your rulings to preserve the decorum of the House, Chair. Perhaps he must listen to the lessons that the Minister of Education is giving him.
Thank you, Honorable Bosman. That matter, I've already ruled on it, and I dismissed that rule of order on the basis of what I had already articulated. So I'm not going to belabor that point, but thanks for raising that. We will proceed. I'm going to call on the ANC Chief Whip, whose hand is up, and see if it's any matter related to this or it's a new matter.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I think, Honorable Speaker, what we are doing today is really an exercise that is not necessary. As the Speaker of the House, you are tasked with a responsibility of ensuring that we all abide by the rules. And it is important, therefore, as one of the rulings that you have made, that you are going to consult the Hansard and come back, because now we will reduce this House into a complaining session where we will misrepresent and misinterpret the rules of the House. I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip of the opposition. I think it will be very much helpful if the Chief Whip and other Chief Whips and the other whips can help me, so that we don't have that. We don't want this House to descend into chaos. So I appreciate what we have just said, but I think all the rulings now have been subjected to a process, and that is what we will follow, so that we have a House that is orderly in order to ensure that we proceed with the business of the day. So thank you very much for assisting in that regard. I appreciate that. May I then go back to the time, the table staff, the minister had 40 seconds that he had used. Is it how many? According to my time here, is it 7 minutes, 3 seconds left? Correct? Okay. Honorable Minister, that's the time, and let us please allow the minister to read, to deliver his speech. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Speaker. And Speaker, let me remind the House, and especially the members of the opposition, that the safety plan consists of 3 integrated components, namely law enforcement, 1, violent prevention, the second one, and urban design is our 3rd component of our safety plan. And in terms of the violence prevention component, I'm very happy to report on the progress we have made in the appointment of more than 1,000 young people as youth safety ambassadors. And everyone can say what they want to about them. We will continue to give young people opportunities. Throughout that was throughout the province. These young people are placed within schools, municipalities, and other partnering organizations. All of these partnership organizations have proven to be invaluable in the project, and we are creating impact in the lives of our communities and our young people. Mr. Speaker, I want to make special mention of the way in which the Overberg municipality has taken the youth safety ambassadors to the next level. A total of 168 safety ambassadors were recruited in the Overberg, and they underwent training to become Overberg patrol officers. The incident, and this includes training in drilling, fitness, radio communication procedures, approaching suspects, and arresting procedures in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act. When I visited the Overberg on the 24th of September, where they had a community safety competition, Mr. Speaker, I was in awe of what I saw. Our young people are bursting at the seams with potential. All they need is a real opportunity. And we are determined to give them that opportunity and that hope. And we don't apologize to anyone for it. Mr. Speaker, we believe in our youth. We are proud of our youth. Our youth are not all drug addicts like we want some of our members want to believe they are. I've said before, and I will say it again, that if we had resources, we would establish more chrysalis campuses across the province. In addition to the long-running 3-month residency program, Mr. Speaker, we are also now using the Chrysalis Academy campus for other programs. We are currently training our youth safety ambassadors at Chrysalis, and we are able to provide a safe space on campus for grade 12s from Mountview High, Groenville High, and Crystal High School, all from an Overpark, to study and prepare in a safe environment for the final exam. That just ended when the exam ended. And we're proud of giving that opportunity to them. We are determined to find a way to scale this project to give our young people who need it the best possible chance in life of getting and beating all the obstacles in their life so that they can get the best possible results in their exams. Our neighborhood watch training, also all of them received training at Chrysalis Academy on trauma-informed approach to community safety. I want to thank Dr. Lucille Meyer and the Chrysalis Academy for partnering with us in these violent prevention initiatives. That and so much more is happening, Mr. Speaker, specifically in the violence prevention component of the safety plan. I am also very proud to say that in terms of the law enforcement component of the safety plan, we have now established 15 law enforcement technical area teams, which I will refer to as the LETATs. A LETAT brings together all law enforcement agencies at the area level to work together, including LEAP, Metro Police, neighborhood watches, and CPFs under the leadership of SAPS. LETAT can be thought as a local law enforcement team convened by the local SAPS station commander. I also want to pay tribute to the leadership of the Provincial Commissioner, General Patekile. You know, for the first time in a long time, we have stability in this province within the SAPS management. It goes without saying that the samenwerking between SAPS and us from the highest level of provincial management right down to the station commander level is because of the leadership of General Patekile. Mr. Speaker, we are succeeding in working together in ways never seen before in the province, despite the best efforts of the negative opposition to show a strawman policies. And then, as we all will no doubt see today and hear today, argue passionately against the very strawman policies that they conjure themselves. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is that we are building a template for the rest of the country. And I want to say that this DA government get things done. And they are so nasty and so jealous about that. That's why they lose elections. The negative opposition is saying nothing original and profound when they say that crime and violence will not be resolved through the policing alone. This point is so obvious. And if they read the safety plan, they would know that we agree. Even though the establishment of the LETAT is an important component of the safety plan, it is by no means the only component of the safety plan. And this negative opposition have managed to convince themselves of that. As the provincial government, we encourage constructive engagement and debate with our critics. I'd like to ask that the debate on the provincial safety plan be taken to the next level. Unfortunately for the negative opposition, that means that they will have to go and read the actual safety plan, because they argue many times without reading anything. The safety plan and the recovery plan have always been about integrating law enforcement, violence prevention, and urban design into a single process underpinned by a whole of government and a whole of society approach. This is why the LETAT, which the law enforcement component form part of, is in the area-based teams. And ABT is not another forum that eats, and they meet once a month in a hall, to talk. That's the lessons we have learned from the disasters that the official negative opposition caused in this province when they were in government. And they all know it. They spend precious resources on MBSOs, which are an excuse to meet, eat, and treat, because they aren't interested in addressing the real issues. Each ABT has a coordinator appointed by DOCS. I want to say that the key performance indicators for these officials will not be how many meetings they have done a month.
Baie dankie, meneer the minister.
My time can never be up.
Yes.
Can never be up. My time says 2 minutes now, Mr. Speaker.
No, you had 8 minutes, and that's what you were allocated, Honourable Minister.
This is the problem with those points of order, Mr. Speaker. I must say with respect.
Honourable
They
Minister,
created to create our debates and we lose time.
made a ruling. You were given opportunity, and what was paused during that period. So the time was paused. There was no malfeasance towards in any way towards terms of the time. So let us now proceed. Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Baie dankie, meneer. Honourable members, I now recognize the Honourable Member Christians.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, the medium-term budget tabled by Honourable Minister Mania on Monday, 6th of December, according to the Minister, is to move us forward. Now, Speaker, the Minister also further said that it's a budget to go back to back us, to find a job, to be safe. But Speaker, I need to ask the question, is this really what the budget tells us? Is this really what it says? Because 1.4 billion over the medium term on the ease of business skill development, investment, exports and energy resilience. But then we have a 2.2 billion on law enforcement officers, support families at risk and also safe spaces. Now, I've got a problem with this because you're putting so much into law enforcement and not putting enough in skilling our young people. That's a major, major problem. The problem is, and this is where the rubber hits the road. I want to make a practical example, Speaker. Just the other day, I was in Park, Sevendelaan and Achterlaan. And people there are moving backwards in the Western Cape. They're not moving forward, they're moving backwards. There's more than 200 people in this one informal settlement. And just to get an ID document is a challenge. Engaging with Home Affairs, and people don't have 140 Rand to get the ID document. And I want to ask the minister if we can look at least put money available for people. There's hundreds of thousands of them that cannot even afford an ID document. It's lost or stolen and they cannot find employment. It's a major, major problem. And that's why I say the people that's disadvantaged, the people that are poor are moving backwards. You cannot even walk in those informal settlements. Poverty, poverty, poverty. And after so many years under DMA government, people are not moving forward. And that is a major, major concern. Speaker, of course, we support the nutrition program. And of course, we support when money goes to aftercare schools, but the aftercare programs. The major problem that I have, and I mentioned it before when Helen Zille was Premier, if you go to the formal Model C schools, they've got after-school programs because teachers, that's part of their job description, being out there with our children. But when you go to the disadvantaged schools, we must pay for that aftercare program. Why can teachers not invest an hour and two and educate our children, skill our children, and we will save money and put it somewhere else? It's my time up. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Christians. Honorable members, I now recognize Honorable America.
Yeah, just note off, Chair. Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to congratulate the newly elected mayors and councillors in the Western Cape following the recent local government elections in November. All 25 local municipalities and district municipalities, including the city of Cape Town, have constituted their councils. This means that our councils are now ready to embark on the program of service delivery for the next 5 years. This year, we continue the continued impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the country's economic recession means that the province's role in assisting municipalities has become essential to local government stability. The Western Cape is committed to help facilitating good governance and growth in local government. And we clearly see this in the Minister's adjustment budget. So much so that the province has allocated a further 30 million Rand in this regard, which will contribute towards capacity building and support initiatives, as well as legal and forensic services. These will go a long way to build on the DA's investment into developing capable governance. The evidence of proactive DA governance is once again seen to be in a league of its own. Despite a sea of corruption and maladministration in the ANC-controlled municipalities, a total of 18 municipalities received clean audits. This is a 38% improvement from the previous financial year. Whilst the municipalities run by the DA have gone from strength to strength, those run by the ANC tell a different story. Beaufort West was given the worst rating of a disclaimed audit outcome with findings, to the extent that the province has identified them to be in a financial crisis. All municipalities under DA governance in the province are in good financial standing with Eskom. This is a reflection of our commitment to be able to manage public finances. In comparison, those which find themselves in arrears are unsurprisingly controlled by the ANC. Speaker, another indication which shows that our DA municipalities are remarkably financially resilient and agile is a study initiated by the Provincial Department of Local Government in collaboration with the Hans Seidel Foundation. The outcome of the study demonstrates that local governments in the care of the DA embody good governance which ensures stability and service delivery. It concluded that local governments which ensured long-term financial planning and investment in innovative administrative mechanisms which are able to adapt to the changing circumstances in which they find themselves. For example, Stellenbosch was able to maintain a budget surplus between an increased revenue collection within the first 3 quarters of the pandemic. This means our governments could continue serving residents with integrity and with dignity. Comparatively, municipalities controlled by the ANC had the already deteriorating financial and governance conditions amplified. This has reached the point that even the National Government of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs labeled Kannaland as dysfunctional and in the state of local governance barometer. The study also raised critical questions of the role national government should be playing in support of provinces and municipalities. For example, the unreliability of equitable shares and conditional grants from Pretoria jeopardizes the long-term sustainability of municipal finances. Speaker, this is why our government's foresight and proactiveness in this regard has culminated in the proposed Sustainable Infrastructure Development and Finance Facility Program. The program would empower the department to match possible funding, including funds from international partners, to each municipality's needs and potential for infrastructure development. In doing so, local municipalities will not have to be subject to unreliable national grant funding, therefore creating infrastructure development for further economic and developmental growth. The province has already identified various catalytic municipal infrastructure projects amounting to 1.8 billion rand in Mossel Bay, Overstrand, Saldanha Bay, Swartland and George. These projects will be broken up in investment into energy, water and water waste management programs. The ancient national government's answer to the decline in local government's ability is part due to their own creating. And that is the district development model. In this model, it seeks to realign the country's resources such that there would be no discrepancies in the approaches taken at district level. Whilst we agree that increased collaboration in terms of a more coordinated budget approach and policies would help resolve the failures of many municipalities, the DDM will achieve the opposite effect. In essence, the ANC national government would be allowed to further their control over our country's resources. This is why the Western Cape developed the JMDA approach. This program has an emphasis placed on cooperation and bringing government closer to the people. Through greater collaboration between all spheres of government, civil society and the private sector, the JDMA is a beacon of hope, and it allows for the planning, budgeting and implementation of policies to be more consolidated. As the ANC continues to plunder our country's resources and push us further into crisis, the more we will have to rely on the proactiveness and creativity of the provincial government to safeguard our municipalities. So, Speaker, Despite the tumultuous year that our country and our economy has endured, the Western Cape government has continued to fulfill its mandate in capacitating municipalities through the joint district and metro approach, as well as sustainable infrastructure development and finance facility mechanisms. Municipalities will continue to be safeguarded in our province against future risks. In this budget, we see that.
Honorable.
Thank you, Speaker.
Your time is up. Thank you very much. Honorable members, I now recognize Honorable Marais, FF+.
Speaker, thank you. The Minister of Finance has used the adjustment appropriation budget to give a wheelchair to a crippled province. Don't blame him for the crippled's lost leg. Put blame where it should be. The COVID-19 has crippled us. Budget cuts has crippled us. A weaker rand has crippled us. This is a wheelchair to a crippled province. Now, one can only solve problems if you're prepared to ask the right questions. The questions we should ask is not who owns the economy. That's the wrong question. Ask who is busy destroying the economy. Who destroyed Eskom, SAA, Denel, SASA, UIF payments, the value of the rand? That's the right question we should ask here. Who developed? We should stop asking who owned the land. Ask rather who develops the land. Who developed it? That made it possible for us to have such a great agricultural, economic section in this country. Ask ourselves, what are the real issues we should address? Why are municipalities in such a financial mess? Nobody asked that question. Who ordered lockdowns that crippled most of our small businesses? That's the question I want to hear in this house, and you can answer it ourselves. The Western Cape is a province trying to play soccer and score good goals with a deflated soccer ball. The budget is not perfect, but it is the best in the face of these budget cuts. It's the best in the face of COVID, unexpected, and economic uncertainty. There's no future for the middle class if we don't address the problems and the now of the poor, the many. Let's address the now and not just look at the future, because the poor has no future. The hungry has no future. We cannot hope for a better future if we don't look at the now. Let's find each other across party political lines. Let's come up with solutions instead of using this platform for grandstanding. This province, if it goes down, it doesn't matter what sweater you wear, you are going down with it because we're in the same boat. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Marais. You were exactly at 3 minutes, so thank you very much for that. Honorable members, I now recognize Honorable Member Brencase.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Speaker, Al-Jamaa feels strongly that it is ingenuous that the medium-term budget statement and 2021 municipal review and outlook is only being presented now, which should have been taken place before the local government elections. This we view as a deliberate ploy by the DA to deceive the poor and by withholding the true reflection of poor economic performance at local level to voters. Al-Jamaa says it is unacceptable that money is always returned to the fiscus. The legislator is failing the province, especially the poor, by withholding from spending on much needed services. There are more than 6,000 learners in the province who could not be placed at schools due to the lack of classrooms. Where do these learners go? Or what happened to them in 2018, 2019 and 2020? How many more have joined the number of 6,000 unplaced learners? The South African Constitution guarantees that everyone has the right to a basic education. Measures should be taken to improve education here in the Western Cape. The apartheid system left our country with an unequal and dysfunctional education system. We do not see that this legislator is putting measures in place to level the playing fields in education. Instead of spending on education, the legislator prefers to return the money to fiscus. The haste to finalize the medium-term budget policy statement and Mero is a calculated move to prevent critical perusal of the budget, thereby deceiving citizens. The budget is by far not pro-poor and fails to allocate funds for much-needed schools. Thank you very much, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Brenkes. Honorable members, I now recognize the Honorable Member Philander.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Honorable Speaker, just yesterday, we reached a milestone in fighting back COVID-19 as we reached 50% of our adult population vaccinated. There's a long way to go, but we take courage in being the first province to reach this mark. And so the Honorable Minister of Finance was quite right when he said vaccines are winning. Thus, I first and foremost want to address the residents of the Western Cape. I say thank you to all who have already joined our vaccination drive and partnered with us to reach this milestone in our recovery plan. We have also reached over 60,000 children between the ages of 12 and 17 years. Through you, Speaker, I wish to send this clear message to residents. Vaccines work and are best defense in beating COVID-19. We know this because they are saving lives. They are taking pressure off our nurses and doctors, and they offer us the best chance for a free future. Speaker, we needed a budget that prioritizes the health and the well-being of every citizen, regardless of their financial circumstances. And that's what we have got from this government. We've got a budget that backs you. This budget makes way for more innovation, even better healthcare, and provides the foundation we need to see to beat COVID-19. And so I extend my appreciation to every doctor, every nurse, vaccinator, data capturer, administrator, and site manager, because they are the heroes who enable this budget to save lives. Speaker, we are not yet done, as these successes coincide with the onset of a fourth wave and a new variant. But where national government was caught on the back foot in managing the announcement of the new variant, we stood ready to back our citizens. The ANC in the Western Cape is on an impossible mission, a fault-finding mission, not a constructive one. And they are trying to do this in the province with the best COVID-19 response, one that saves jobs and provides services whilst upholding the value of dignity, and it has done so holistically. Speaker, the opposition criticizes good budget practice when they point out our 800 million in provincial reserves. They conveniently forget that funds were ring-fenced to manage infections and the ever-changing landscape of risks brought about by this pandemic. It is precisely because of these good budget practices that we were able to plan ahead and make provision for the extension of staff contracts, oxygen requirements, and bed availability to manage subsequent waves and variants of COVID-19. The reprioritization of an additional 211 million to fight the COVID-19 pandemic in the Western Cape will ensure that citizens receive the care when and where needed. We will back hope. The agility in the provincial government's COVID-19 response means that it will be able to redirect funds where care is needed by transfers to regional and district hospitals. This will make sure we don't run out of capacity. Speaker, in the Western Cape, we have tabled an adjustment budget that is balanced to manage COVID-19 effectively until the end of this financial year and over the next 3 financial years. It also speaks to the core value of accountability of this DA-led government, a principle unfamiliar to those in the opposition benches, as its colleagues at National oversaw the irregular expenditure of almost 150 million. And to make matters worse, the National Health DG suspension following these allegations were lifted. At this stage, I think the ANC stands for quote-unquote accountability, not a chance. In addition, Honourable Speaker, and in stark contrast, this Western Cape Department of Health received a third consecutive clean audit during a pandemic, the very first in the country to do so. Speaker, this gives confidence to every resident in the province that taxes collected from their hard-earned money are used responsibly for their service. And through you, Speaker, the next time the EFF comes to claim that clinics do not have generators, they must be bold enough to say exactly where, because it's a blatant lie. Speaker, I note here with pride and appreciation on behalf of local businesses that a total of 1.5 billion of all COVID-19 related expenditure by provincial departments and public entities was spent on small, medium and micro enterprises in the Western Cape. For the current financial year, I also wish to welcome the additional 35 million non-COVID-19 care for the re-escalation of HIV, TB and malaria in the form of community outreach grants. Speaker, no budget debate is complete without considering other sectoral implications. The African National Congress remains in pursuit of realizing a pipe dream in the form of the National Health Insurance Bill. Meanwhile, the Western Cape already moves to providing universal healthcare in the province, despite a difficult fiscal environment and pandemic amounts. The ANC is gravely mistaken. As the DA, we do not oppose universal healthcare. In fact, by all relevant metrics, we lead South Africa in the provision of quality healthcare for all our citizens. But what we will not stand by and provide any support for is the NHI, because we all know that this will ultimately become another ANC-sponsored bottomless pit for cadres and comrades. We will not let healthcare become another SAA, another Eskom, or another SABC. In conclusion, Speaker, I want to commend the Provincial Treasury and our finance team for tabling yet another balanced and responsible budget. And I want to welcome in particular the protection of frontline services, including education, health, and social development in the Western Cape. It is the beneficiaries of these departments that have to be backed the most. I extend my accolades to every official and medical practitioner for their resilience and the efforts to help reimagine the system in the Western Cape. Their tireless efforts have exceeded all expectations and provide us with the confidence that our systems and budget truly do back the people of the Western Cape. And I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Philander. Honorable members, I now recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Greetings also to the MEC for Finance and all honourable members. Speaker, it's very interesting that when Member Philander uses her speech to discredit the national health insurance system, it begins to remind one of exactly what the Democratic Alliance is, and that is a party that fundamentally stands against the majority of South Africans who are poor. And I want to use one example before getting back to the NHI. It was our President Ramaphosa, in the interests of over 6 million workers in this country, initiated a process at NEDLAC to arrive at what we call a minimum wage. And after a very detailed process of consultation, it was agreed that that minimum wage should average out at about 3,500 Rand. Clearly not a living wage, but a minimum wage which is going to benefit 6.5 million and has benefited 6.5 million farm workers, domestic workers. Yet it was the DA, just like in their opposition to the national health insurance system, that did not agree with 3,500 and in fact said that 1,800 Rand should be the minimum wage. Yet MEC Mainir in this medium-term budget policy statement wants to come and talk about a social wage. Now, every aspect of the social wage which the MEC has referred to, in fact, amounts to allocations from the national government in regard to indigent grant at local government level, issues around child support grants, various pensions and other grants. I would advise this DA to actually look at the issue of the minimum wage. The social wage is being accommodated by the national government. That's where it is coming. But you as the DA have proposed that 3,500 is too much for a minimum wage. That is DA policy. And I think the MEC needs to tell us in this House today whether he, as the MEC for Finance, supports the DA policy that a minimum wage in this country should be 1,800 Rand. Can he tell this House, Speaker, that he can survive on 1,800 Rand? Yet he wants to come to this House and in his speech talk about a social wage of which the DA's got absolutely nothing to do with, because all of those allocations come via the National Treasury, via the equitable share, via conditional grants to this budget. And yet the DA itself cannot agree to a basic minimum wage. Similarly, the national health insurance system. The reality is, if you either believe in equality or you don't believe in equality. And the reality is when the DA, through the honourable member who just spoke before me, comes to this House and talks about universal healthcare as opposed to the national insurance system, she's basically arguing for differentiated healthcare, not equal healthcare where everyone, irrespective of your income, has the ability to receive quality healthcare. And this is the basic difference between the African National Congress and the DA. But it's also significant, Speaker, that it was just yesterday where right-wing parties, such as the Democratic Alliance and also backed by the Freedom Front Plus, and I think what has now become known as the EFF Plus, the Freedom Front Plus, and now you've got the EFF Plus, who stood together to oppose a fundamental issue which would assist in terms of land redistribution in this province. And that was when they rejected the proposed amendment to the Constitution, which would allow and clarify in what circumstances there would be expropriation without compensation. And like the EFF has jumped into bed with the DA in Knysna, like the EFF has jumped into bed with the DA in Johannesburg and Tshwane, the reality is that the EFF itself, by doing that and by voting with the DA and the Freedom Front Plus yesterday, are actually voting against one of the important mechanisms to achieve an equal society, and that is to practically move in regard to the issue of land. Now, the reality is, if one looks at urban land ownership in the Western Cape.
Honourable members, Honourable the Leader of the Opposition, please take your seat. Honourable Bartman, is that a point of order?
Chair, I would like to know whether Member Dagmar will take a question.
Thank you, Honourable Bartman. Honourable the Leader of the Opposition, will you take a question?
No, I won't take a question. Thanks. So the reality is that
the honourable member will not take the question. So Honourable Dagmar, you may
when
proceed.
we look at what happened,
just for information, the time was muted.
Was halted.
It was halted, so you may not blame us when your time runs out.
I'm not blaming you.
Thank
Speaker.
you.
So if you look at the reality of what the EFF, the DA, the Freedom Front Plus and others, and Honourable Murray asks, why do we ask questions about land ownership and the issue of the economy in an adjustment, in a budget debate like this?
Honourable the Leader of the Opposition, there's another hand online.
Okay.
Will you please mute and switch off your microphone there? Thank you. Honourable Makamba Boyka, is that a point of order?
Somlomo, thank you very much. I just want to, I'm seeking your guidance if it's parliamentary for the honourable member to misguide the House and accusing parties of voting with other parties without having
Thank you,
facts.
Makamba Boja. Thank you. You've asked the question. In terms of this debate, there is nothing wrong with what the honourable member says. It's a political debate, and this broken no rule. Please proceed, Honourable Dagmo.
Thank you. No, the record will show that the EFF voted with the DA in Knysna. The record will show that the EFF voted with the DA in Johannesburg. The record will show that the EFF voted with the DA against land redistribution. That is what the record and the history books will show. But why do we need to look at these issues? If we look at our province and we look specifically at urban land ownership in the Western Cape, 70% of urban land in our province is owned by South Africans who had been classified white. And that population amounts to 15% of the Western Cape population. 10% of urban land ownership is held by coloured South Africans so classified. And the coloured community constitutes almost 50% of the Western Cape, yet only own 10% of urban land. 8% of urban land is owned by Indian South Africans so classified, who constitute 1%. And then 3.5% of urban land in the Western Cape is owned by African South Africans so classified. And African people amount to 32.8%. Now, when you look at that actual stark inequality, and then we go and look at the issue of agricultural land, in this province, and the MEC refuses to even provide us statistics because not this MEC of agriculture. He even refuses to provide statistics because the reality is only 1% of private agricultural land is in black hands, African, coloured, and Indian. Now, these are the issues that one would expect the DA in this medium-term budget process would actually address. But they don't. Even in the municipal economic review, they outline the sectors of the economy in the Eden district, they outline the sectors of, but nowhere in that analysis do they indicate in the transport or the tourism or this business, what is the percentage of black ownership? And by black, I mean coloured, African, and Indian, and the issue of women ownership of this economy. So the reality is for the DA, they are race denialists. They actually deny the existence of race and how that has impacted on the inequalities which exist in our country today. And I think what's particularly important is that we note that all those parties that have voted against the need to clarify under which circumstances expropriation without compensation can take place must bear responsibility for not reversing the patterns of colonialism, of apartheid, but actually deepening and strengthening them. If you can spend, Deputy Speaker, in this medium term, you allocate over 2 billion to safety. That is a choice that you're making. Why not allocate some of those provincial reserves to specifically empower African, coloured, and Indian farmers to access agricultural land in this province? That is a choice that you're making. The choice that you're making is not to turn back the legacy of colonialism and apartheid, because the reality is that the governing party in this particular province has made that policy choice of not being interested in dismantling the impact of apartheid and colonialism. That is the reality. And I think it's also important, you know, the MEC comes to this house and he wants to talk a lot about transparency in procurement. Now, I want to say that I have in front of me the supplier spend by this province from the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of March 2021. And through the Speaker, I wonder if the MEC is aware that 258 million rand and some more was paid out to Tusk Construction Support Services. And what I think is important when the MEC stands up and talks about transparency in regard to procurement, is he aware of a management report by the Auditor General which states very clearly that in terms of non-compliance, not only with the Constitution, but also with 16A62 of the National Treasury Regulations, that you have a situation where the Department of Transport, with the approval of Treasury, appoints this construction management agency, pays them in this one financial year alone, 256 million. How many schools could that 256 million actually have purchased? How many clinics could it actually? And this is in a department that has over 59 employees in the supply chain management in the Department of Public Works, yet 256 million rand. And in the management report, it actually basically says here that the system requires, in terms of supply chain management, that the head of department must establish and appoint a bid adjudication committee that will serve for a maximum period of 3 years. Do you know, Honourable Speaker, that the non-compliance identified by the Auditor General was that the Auditor General noted on inspection that the BAC, that is the bid adjudication committee minutes, prepared by Tusk, dated 4th of February 2019, that none, not a single member of the bid adjudication committee came from one of the officials of the department. So here you appoint a private company to do this, and the bid adjudication committee, which is absolutely essential in terms of Treasury regulations, there's not a single official serving on that bid adjudication committee. And here we are dealing with an amount of 256 million rand in one financial year. That is actually, Speaker, 1/4 of the education infrastructure budget in a year going to consultants. And I think the MEC needs to, when he talks about a medium term, is Tusk going to be paid the same amount next year? Are they going to be paid more in the following financial year? And I would also, Speaker, like to draw the attention of the MEC to a document dated 2014, when the initial motivation was made to the then MEC to enter into a transaction that binds the Western Cape government to a future commitment beyond 2014, that is in regard to broadband. And then he needs to tell us in the medium-term expenditure framework, because you don't see it in this particular document, the amounts that they sought approval for. And if you actually look at this document, which was tabled to the Treasury in 2014, they say that the key costs associated with broadband over a 10-year period, which brings us, that 10-year period comes to an end in 23-24. The service provider fee of 2.8 billion rand, a SETA charge of 825 million, SETA once-off 16.3, internet service for schools 214 million, and internet service for Western Cape 68 million. Now, the reality is that in the medium term, it is here projected that this service provider will get 391 million rand, and in the outer year, 412 million rand. Now, what I want to know, in terms of this medium-term budget policy statement, which has been tabled, and this document that was accepted by the Provincial Cabinet in regard to what the broadband is going to cost us, where is the correlation of these amounts, which supposedly are going to the service provider, and the amounts provided in this? And there's a complete mismatch. And I want the MEC to explain the differences in the document that was approved by the Provincial Cabinet in 2014, actually on the 8th, while the current Premier was the then MEC, on the 8th of the 4th, 2014, and then what appears in this medium-term budget expenditure. That's what we need to look at, because this document projects what we're going to spend, and this document does not correlate in regard to those particular figures. And this is the so-called accountability and transparency in procurement that we're talking about. So the Minister needs to tell this House, is he happy with the Tusk procurement and what's been paid to them in terms of value for money? Does he approve of that? And can he tell us whether the document that was developed as a motivation for bringing broadband into this province has been adhered to, and the cost contained in the document that Cabinet approved to, whether that was actually the case or not?
Thank you,
That is
Honourable
what this
the
House
Leader
wants to
of
know.
the
Thank you.
Opposition. Your time is up. Honourable members, the time now is for the Honourable Allen to address the House.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I am delighted to be participating in this debate here today. I want to thank the Minister of Finance, Minister Meinier, for tabling his speech as well as his contribution here today, together with those members that participated in this debate. Speaker, with the time frames allocated to political parties, opposition parties spoke for 40 minutes today, with the ANC allocated 24 minutes. Now, Speaker, studies have indicated that the average person speaks approximately between 100 to 140 words per minute. Taking an average of 120 words per minute and multiplied by 40 gives us an amount of 4,800 words spoken by the opposition here today. Speaker, 4,800 words filled with misplaced facts, 4,800 words filled with disinformation and hypocrisy, 4,800 words filled with falsehoods and hallucinations from members of the opposition. Speaker, where others see only decline and spend their days complaining, I see the excellent work done by the Western Cape government and as outlined by many of the speakers here today. And just yesterday, Speaker, we witnessed a victory for South Africa's constitutional order when the ANC failed to muster the mandatory support required to amend the Constitution of South Africa to allow for expropriation of land without compensation. And if anything, Speaker, the ANC and the EFF wasted time on a process that was never going to address the land question for landless South Africans. For all the years the committee in the National Assembly has spent on trying to take away the property rights of South Africans and nationalize all land could have been better spent, Speaker, which could have been better spent in order to open access to state land, improve tenure of security, and providing support to emerging farmers. It's as if the Honorable Dagmo is forgetting that the Department of Land Reform is situated and is run by the National Department of, which is run by the ANC national government. Also, Speaker, as far as I know, Minister Meinier's request for ANC members in this House to put up their own property, I believe that none of those members were open to giving their own property to be expropriated in that regard. But Speaker, if I can get into it, 4,800 words of hypocrisy and hallucinations is a lot. Let me deal with it one by one. The ANC stated, together with Al Jamaa, that they wanted to expose DA hypocrisy for rejecting the DORA on the basis of insufficient time for public participation. Let me be clear, that is a non-argument as there were delays in the national adjustment budget and that provinces could only proceed once national has finalized their process. This is a direct impact of COVID-19 and sectoral closure, and that is a result of the ANC. Furthermore, the budget was described here today as it offers no opportunities. I find that mind-boggling when we look at the national minister in his maiden speech as outlined by the provincial minister. And if we compare the national MTBS to the Western Cape one, our budget is a budget of hope. The ANC has no clear recovery path, no response of energy problems, no ease of business following the devastating impacts of COVID-19, which poses serious challenges, Speaker, for the country and provincial growth. Who has a plan to get away from load shedding? The Western Cape. Who has a plan to keep bailing out state-owned enterprises? Only the ANC and their counterpart Good together in Pretoria. Under the Western Cape Recovery Plan, West Coast Safe Jobs and support programs will continue. It was also mind-boggling to listen to the Honourable Dagmo based on his comments on the NHI. I would want to remind the Honourable Dagmo that it was in fact the former Minister of Finance, Tito Mboweni, who actually called the ANC's bluff by stating that the NHI is not feasible in its current form. But we know that we have made strides here in the Western Cape, that ministers and ANC members even complain in Khayelitsha if hospitals are doing too well. Speaker, the criticism of government for the surrendering unspent funds. Let me be clear about this and take the ANC a step back. What do all the indicators say? It says that life, that quality of life, life expectancy, quality of schools and hospitals, audit outcomes, management of COVID pandemic, provision of housing, they all point that the Western Cape is indeed the best run province in the entire country. And only the Western Cape is one of 2 provinces where the unemployment rate regressed as seen in the last quarterly stats. The ANC speaks about unemployment rates, and the first speaker said that a 4.7 increase is mind-boggling. She forgets that the Northwest indicated a 7.2% increase, while Limpopo a 6.2% increase. Furthermore, I would want to state on the underspending, it's as if the opposition has forgotten that we have experienced various levels of lockdown restrictions and that the unspent funds are a direct result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But Speaker, as I was listening to those members, I'm happy that the opposition actually expect the DA-led government of the Western Cape to actually spend money, even if it's virtually impossible, which actually speaks to how good we are doing here in the Western Cape, that even under impossible circumstances, under circumstances imposed by a national government with irrational regulations, the ANC still expects the DA to perform miracles. But we will say that we will continue with the good work that we are doing here in the Western Cape. Furthermore, we heard, Speaker, that there was accusations leveled regarding the safety plan. But had it not been for the lack of leadership from the national minister, his denial of the DNA backlog, under-resourcing in the Western Cape, failure to use ring fence.
Will you please take your seat?
Is my time up?
It's a point of order. We've paused your time, so there won't be a risk to you losing time. Honorable Said, is that a point of order?
Speaker?
What's your
No,
point?
Speaker, I don't have any. There's nothing, Speaker.
All right, your hand was up.
Oh, sorry. It must have just been sorry.
All right.
Speaker, are you able to confirm the time left?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Honorable Said. The time, Honorable Allen, you have used 7 minutes, 23 seconds.
7 minutes left.
You have used up 7 minutes, 23 seconds. So out of your 10 minutes, you are left with 1.5 minutes. We're to 2 minutes and a half.
2.5 minutes.
Yes. You may proceed, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Member Syed for stopping the flow. But we will continue because regardless of attempts from the ANC, we will strive ahead. Also, Speaker, law enforcement and what we are doing in terms of the law enforcement advancement plan, employing additional law enforcement officers requires training, which has been impaired by the lockdowns, resulting in underspending and the surrendering of funds. And we have seen this, that regardless of those scenarios that were created by the ANC, we have seen the reduction in the murder rate in priority areas, which is proven of the success here in the Western Cape. Speaker, where we have seen that the province, in the last quarterly crime stats, a reduction in terms of violent crime together with the murder rate in the province. I would be more than happy to forward that information to Member Dugmore. I know that he is extremely busy his side, but I would be able to share that with you as well. But Speaker, that 4,800 words, it's clearly that baie mense report miss it. So allow me to navigate further with my additional minute and a half, and also address that member Nkondlo spoke about GBV. And for once, I actually agree with her that she's right that GBV is a serious issue and that we need to tackle it. But I hope that the ANC and member Nkondlo will join the DA in calling her national minister to ensure that GBV is more than a social construct, and that member Nkondlo will actually join the DA in our fight to drive this issue of having GBV become an official crime category for reporting, because the ANC doesn't take it serious, member Nkondlo. This is the only province with a comprehensive GBV implementation plan. As I end off, Speaker, the ANC stance on the adjustment budget refers to many aspects of the budget as unclear and confusing. This is more a reflection of the ANC's own ability to understand simple government documents. It is not a valid critique of the work done by the departments here in the Western Cape. This is supported by the fact that they couldn't even interpret the parliamentary schedule correctly, as the second reading happens on Wednesday today and not Thursday as they claimed in their press release. Speaker, part of why this government needed to table a budget to back up the residents is due to the mismanagement of the ANC and Good Party National Government Alliance. The ANC had for years failed to empower citizens in South Africa and to develop the infrastructure needed in order to build a strong economy, along with building a strong healthcare system. But it has also... So we need this budget back for the citizens. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, honorable members. Order. Order, honorable members. May I now give the opportunity to the Honorable Minister Many to address the House.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I must say the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Cameron Dugmore, I think looks a lot like we all feel, exhausted. And he was certainly, as a result of that, more rambling than usual. He claims to be a big supporter of the minimum wage. He stands for the poor. He supports the minimum wage. But of course, there is one category of worker in this country who does not get the minimum wage, and that is none other than people who work for his party, the ANC. And yet he claims to support the minimum wage. Speaker, I want to begin by thanking all the members who participated in this debate on the principle of the Adjustments Appropriation Bill here in our Parliament. And I'd like to begin with a special thank you to the Honourable Regan Allen for his demolition of most points raised by most members of the opposition in the debate. Minister Anton Bredell might need to help me here, but in Afrikaans, I think they say that the honourable member gooi kolle. And he did it extremely well, and I'd like to thank him for his effort. But I do want to pick up on a few themes that were raised by members of the opposition. First, the leader of the opposition, Cameron Dugmore's very loyal lieutenant, the Honourable Nomin Nkondlo, claimed that there was insufficient time to deal with the budget. Only one day to consider the budget. The Honourable Brinkcase had a similar complaint, said that the budget was rushed. And I did see in some public statements that there was wording that the budget was rushed, it was pushed. The Honourable Nomin Nkondlo said that this resulted in a frenetic period where there was now not enough time to read. And all of this was conjured up as a conspiracy to evade scrutiny and circumvent accountability. Well, the fact is, Honourable Speaker, that the national government postponed the national medium-term budget policy statement, which was supposed to take place on the 4th of November 2021, which of course pushed out the whole budget process, and which is why we find ourselves here today with a compressed budget process in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. Of course, the official reason, Speaker, for the postponement was that the postponement was necessary because of the local government elections. But of course, we all know that the real reason for the postponement was that national government and the national executive are a bit like a bunch of wasps in a jar and could not agree to the budget. And so it was postponed. And the evidence for that, of course, is the 73.2 billion rand in the unallocated reserve, which was revealed in the National Medium-Term Budget Policy Statement. Now, Speaker, several members referred to the question of poverty and social support. Honourable nominee Nkondlo claims that we are silent on the details of social support. The Honourable Mkhamba Botya claims that we are not doing enough on poverty, that we are not doing enough on inequality. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Cameron Dugmore, says that we do not stand and do enough for the poor in the Western Cape. Now, of course, what all the honourable members appear, perhaps with the rare exception of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, seem to have missed the section on the social wage in the medium-term budget policy statement. And it doesn't come as a surprise. Now, the one honourable member, as I've said before, Nomin Nkondlo, said that there's not enough time to read. And so I thought, Speaker, that this is, given the pressures that members are under, exactly the time for me to read the section on the provincial social wage to honourable members. Now, I would refer honourable members to page 66 of the medium-term budget policy statement. And it begins by saying that the social wage is a cornerstone of the Western Cape government's effort to improve the lives of the most vulnerable families and communities in the province. There's a commitment to free primary health care, no-fee schools, social protection, housing, and the provision of community amenities in vulnerable households. You can see why this section of the medium-term budget policy statement so unsettles the leader of the opposition. It gives effect to our key budget objective. We go on to protecting key frontline services and accounts for 82%. I want to repeat that, 82% of the total expenditure over the medium term in the Western Cape. It demonstrates very clearly in table 4.1, and I would like to help the Leader of the Opposition. I think he might have the wrong book. Oh no, he has the right one. Excellent. He is with me. If I refer him to table 4.1, it demonstrates that we will be spending 60.5 billion rand, 59.6 billion rand, and 60.69 billion rand on the social wage, protecting those frontline services, on education, on health and social protection, and contrary to what the Honourable Leader of the Opposition tries to infer, supporting the poor in the Western Cape. Now, I know, Speaker, that this is painful for the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Cameron Dugmore, but I think that we need to pursue the point. We go on in the book to say the Western Cape government is committed to interventions such as the nutrition program, the National School Nutrition Learner Transport, fee exemptions, and of course the no-fee policy, which will benefit about 708,000 students. We set out our commitment to delivering primary health care. We go on to the province's delivery in social protection, in housing, and we refer to the after-school programs, the mod centres in 181 schools, and of course our public libraries. We go on to refer to our efforts to support the poor and marginalised in the local government space. But at the end of the day, I know that this is painful for the Leader of the Opposition, but this section demonstrates that the provincial government stands with and supports the poor in the Western Cape, and not all the allocations
Honourable Minister, will you please take your seat? Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, thank you. Speaker, I'd like to ask whether the MEC is prepared to take a question.
Thank you, Honourable Dugmore. Honourable Minister, are you prepared to take a question?
I'm not prepared to take a question, Honourable Speaker.
The request has been rejected. Honourable the Leader of the Opposition may proceed, Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. There were then a number of honourable members, including again the Honourable Nomi Nkondlo, said remarkably that there's no provision in this budget for small and medium-term enterprises. Another member said that we were not doing enough for small business. Well, we evidently not looking at the same budget. If we dig into the adjustments budget, what do we see? 857,000 to the Langeberg municipality to support SMME development, 2.7 million to the Hessequa municipality to support SMME development, 2 million to the Oudtshoorn municipality to support SMME development, 2.3 million to the Mossel Bay municipality to support SMME William, 2.2 million rand to the Swellendam municipality to support SMME development, 2.9 million rand to Lebit, a business incubator to support SMME development, 2 million rand to the South African Agri Academy to support SMME development, 2.1 million rand to the Reconstructed Living Lab to support SMME development, 3.9 million rand to the Innovator Trust to support SMME development, 3.8 million rand to ASISA to support SMME development, 302,000 rand to the False Bay College to support SMME development, 136,000 rand to the Cape IT Initiative to support SMME development, etc. Honourable Speaker, there were also a number of members who raised the question of B, saying that we refuse to implement prescripts of B, only, of course, to refer the member to our annual procurement disclosure report, which I discussed at length in the medium-term budget policy statement. And what does that reveal? It reveals that we spent in the last financial year 1.23 billion rand of all COVID-19 expenditure on B suppliers. Honourable Speaker, the Honourable Brett Heron is concerned about spending on infrastructure. I think that the topic was dealt with very eloquently and in detail by the Minister of Education. But for a person like the Honourable Brett Heron, who prides himself in mastering the details, he seems to have got the details wrong. First, only about 0.2% of the total budget has been surrendered. And second, the funds to which he refers and to which he is concerned about are not being, as he claims, abandoned or indeed returned to the fiscus, but have been reallocated to the votes and will be spent on, as the case may be, managing schools and building roads over the medium term. Honourable Speaker, the Honourable Ferron Christians is deeply concerned about poverty, and I think I and all the members of the executive and indeed all the members of this House share that concern. I would point out to him that we do make a massive investment in public employment programs, and we estimate that we support about 86,000 work opportunities in the Western Cape. And of course, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, that will be complemented by the additional 600 million rand, which will be allocated as a result of the Presidential Youth Programme, and will support about 20,000 young people in our province. Speaker, the Honourable Peter Murray, I think, asks exactly the right question. He asks, well, what is destroying the economy? And I think in my opening remarks, I had a very clear answer to his question, and that is the national government. The national government, which, as I said, delivers a stagnant economic growth, lockdowns, looting, load shedding, budget deficits, staggering national debt, zombie state-owned enterprise, and general hopelessness in South Africa. Finally, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Cameron Dugmore, raised some specific questions. The very purpose of the procurement disclosure report is to disclose information about COVID-related expenditure. And that information often results, I think, in some hard questions, which are exactly the kind of questions that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is asking. And I would suggest that he raise those questions with the Minister of Transport and Public Works. On the question of broadband, I was not, as the Honourable Leader of the Opposition knows, I was not present in or a member of government in 2014. But it seems to me obvious that this program, which has been implemented over a number of years, has been revised and adapted. And it's precisely for that reason that, as I mentioned in the medium-term budget policy statement, we are conducting an expenditure review on that program in order to assess its efficiency. Finally, Speaker, there were again a number of members who raised the question of humanitarian relief and poverty, and claimed that there was nothing in this budget in relation to humanitarian relief, and again that we were doing nothing about poverty. But what a number of honourable members, in fact all honourable members, appear to have missed is of course the local government public employment support grant, which I have to confess is buried in the 2021 draft notice of additional and amended allocations to municipalities, but was tabled. Now that grant will allocate 50 million rand to municipalities across this province for short-term work opportunities. If we look at the document, the grant's purpose, and I quote, is to coordinate and ensure the implementation of targeted short-term public employment programs for communities identified as being in distress through conditional transfers or local and district municipalities in the Western Cape. What are the overall outcomes which government seeks to achieve? Well, they are set out in the documents, and I quote, poverty alleviation through short-term job creation, increased employment and employment equity amongst the marginalized and poor communities, skills development, and of course, improved service delivery through targeted social, environmental, and infrastructure initiatives. We will be allocating 50 million rand to that program. And of course, despite that, there are members that claim that we do, that the budget makes no mention of humanitarian relief, which it does. Finally, Speaker, I did notice that the Honourable Brett Heron in his public statements used my refrain and then twisted it to say, well, the provincial government, it was the provincial government that were, in his words, knocked down and out. But the truth is that the only person who has been knocked down and knocked out is the Honourable Brett Heron himself, who was knocked out and knocked down by Jordan Hill Lewis, who is now, I'm proud to say, the Mayor of Cape Town. Speaker, I began by thanking all members for their contribution to this debate. Of course, I think what is most disappointing is that the contributions from most opposition members do not contain one new idea to move us forward, does not look for new solutions to which the Honourable Peter Murray referred, and reminds me of the quote, all fire and fury signifying nothing. In the end, Speaker, we have been hit hard and we may have been knocked out, but we have not been knocked out in the Western Cape. We are going to stand up, we are going to brush ourselves off, and we are going to fight on so that we move forward in the Western Cape. I thank you.
Order, honourable members. Thank you, the honourable minister. Honourable members, that concludes the debate on the consideration of the principle of the bill. Are there any objections to the approval of the principle of the bill? No objections. Agreed to.
No.
Thank you. No objections. Agreed.
No object.
Who's objecting?
As the ANC.
The ANC is objecting.
Yes.
The objection of the ANC will be noted. The Secretary will read the bill.
Western Cape Adjustments Appropriation Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The House, having dealt with this matter, will now deal with the separate votes going forward. Now I request the Secretary to read the second order of the day.
Consideration and finalization of the Western Cape Biodiversity Bill, B2B 2021.
Honourable members, there is the speakers list, and I wish to request the Honourable Minister of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, Honourable Minister Pride, to address the House.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker and Honourable Members. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the Western Cape Biodiversity Bill for our debate and consideration. Today marks the culmination of a significant milestone in our law reform process, driving our transition towards ecological sustainability. The people in the Western Cape are gifted with world-renowned biodiversity and natural resources. Together with this comes international responsibility as well as significant opportunities for our people and the biodiversity economy. The province is home to the Cape Floristic Region, the smallest and most diverse of the 6 global floral kingdoms, and one of the 34 globally recognized biodiversity hotspots. About 34% of the succulent Karoo global biodiversity hotspots occurs within the province. Legally recognized protected areas covered approximately 13% of the province, with an additional 34% of the land area identified as critical for biodiversity conservation. Ecosystem goods and services are the foundation of our economy in the Western Cape and are necessary for inclusive economic growth and a sustainable delivery of basic services. The province's dependence on ecosystem services, including but not limited to water resources, highlights the needs which people have to ensure long-term ecological resilience, which underpins ecosystem services. Honourable Speaker, these life support systems are the lifeblood of our economy. Our catchment and water are the basis of many industries. Our ecosystem biodiversity and natural landscapes are the basis of our tourism economy and the drawcard of the local and location of many industries. In responding to these imperatives and in our context, we have taken the journey to modernize, rationalize, and to align provincial legislation underpinning the concurrent mandate of nature conservation. The Western Cape Biodiversity Bill is value-based and enables ecosystem services and infrastructure to be resilient. The One Cape 2040 challenge is also that of creating a resilient, inclusive, and competitive Western Cape with higher rates of employment, producing growing incomes, greater quality, and an improved quality of life. Providing for the framework and institutions for nature conservation and the protection, management, and sustainable use of biodiversity and ecosystems in this province is fundamental to attaining Focus Area 5, creating an enabling environment for economic growth through resource resilience within the Western Cape. Inspired priority, VIP2, growth and jobs, and contributes directly to VIP4, mobility and spatial transformation of the Western Cape's government Provincial Strategic Plan 2019 to 2014, and is essential to driving the economic and ecological transitions envisaged in One Cape 2040. Honourable Speaker, the COVID-19 pandemic has emphasized the dependence of human well-being and a sustainable economy on natural systems that provide for critical resources and basic human needs. In providing for a long-term resilience of the ecosystems on which society and the economy depends, the bill and its implementation contributes directly to the three pillars of the Western Cape Economic Recovery Plan: safety, jobs, and dignity. The Western Cape government seeks to ensure that it puts into effect the rights found in Section 24 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa 1996 to have the environment protected for the benefit of present and future generations through reasonable legislative and other measures. Firstly, to promote conservation, and secondly, to secure ecologically sustainable development and use of natural resources while promoting justifiable economic and social development. Biodiversity and protected areas in this province are currently regulated in terms of the National Environmental Management Biodiversity Act 2004, the National Environmental Management Act Protected Areas Act 2003, the Western Cape Nature Conservation Board Act 1998, and the Nature Conservation Ordinance 1974. The current protection afforded by this legislation is insufficient to conserve biodiversity within this province. Honourable Speaker, the ordinance was enacted prior to the coming into effect of the Constitution. Furthermore, it does not take account of the respective legislative changes and mandates that have subsequently been introduced, and the change in biodiversity management and nature conservation. There is now a shift away from a regulatory body policing biodiversity by issuing permits in favor of a move towards the protection of habitats of species, which is a shared responsibility of the state landowners and beneficiaries. The bill also gives effect to the cooperative governance provisions of the Constitution by enabling and ensuring the proactive management of the impact of activities on biodiversity in a holistic manner. The bill identifies the roles and responsibilities on the respective organs of state in light of their constitutional mandates and clarifies the relationship between the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning and the provincial public entity Cape Nature. The bill is aligned with the new set of planning and environmental legislation in the country and province and has been drafted with this new legislation in mind. The bill also introduced cross-cutting and proactive mechanisms, including the requirement to publish a frequently reviewed provincial biodiversity spatial plan, which ensures that biodiversity is included in planning and on local and provincial level. Biodiversity priority areas are not only identified, but that their protection and management are also included in planning and decision-making tools. Rather than providing for new administrative processes to enable this integration, the bill provides for mainstreaming and integration into these existing planning and decision-making processes. This introduces a holistic approach to biodiversity management within the province. Honourable Speaker, the bill also requires the compilation, publication and regular review of a provincial protected area expansion strategy, specifically to enable proactive mechanisms to meet our international obligation for the conservation and priority biodiversity and ecological infrastructure. It further provides for innovative approaches to conservation stewardship, for which Cape Nature is recognized as a world leader. These mechanisms recognize the essential role of partnerships with communities and other owners of land. Stewardship partnerships, Honourable Speaker and members, must be our focus to ensure long-term resilience and productive landscapes. Biodiversity is not just something that is kept behind the fence. These are the life support systems that are at the very heart of our health and well-being. Protection of biodiversity conservation is the responsibility of each one of us. Mobilization of stakeholders' partnerships is thus central to our collective success. Honourable Speaker, the bill provides an enabling framework for the green and blue economies in this province, encouraging mainstreaming and rationalized regulations in key dependent sectors, communities, partners and beneficiaries to manage biodiversity in productive and urban landscapes. The bill allows for the promotion and development of ecotourism in protected areas under the control of Cape Nature. Cape Nature tourism function has been escalated and included as one of the objectives of the bill. Can I continue, Honourable Speaker?
Please proceed, Honourable Minister.
Honourable Speaker, if the tools incorporated in the bill are used to their full extent, the province will be en route to achieving the goals expressed in the Provincial Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, namely ecological resilience and the ability to support a sustainable living environment within this province. This will also enable our contribution to the achievement of the Global Biodiversity Framework, targets currently being developed through the Conference of Parties to the Convention of Biological Diversity. The bill, with its alignment to international obligations, targets the bill with its alignment to international obligations, targets, and the mechanisms contained therein will allow South Africa to meet its international biodiversity targets. The bill has made the paradigm shift from nature conservation in a limited sense to biodiversity management in a wide sense, aligned to the Provincial Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, and this shift thinking is now translated into the legislative domain, which comes at a critical time when the province faces challenges presented by climate change. Honourable Speaker and honourable members, the bill enables a range of enforcement mechanisms which will allow for administrative as well as criminal penalties to be imposed on those who fail to comply with the provisions, which will allow flexible and appropriate enforcement of biodiversity-related crimes. At the same time, the bill provides for significant rationalization of administrative burdens and allows for streamlined regulations and nature-based industries, which in turn enable the growth of biodiversity economy. To briefly summarize the process leading up to today, in April 2014, the Provincial Cabinet gave approval to amalgamate the draft Western Cape Nature Conservation Board Amendment Bill 2012 and the draft Western Cape Environmental Conservation Bill 2013 into one consolidated bill. A first draft of this amalgamated bill was produced by March 2015. The Department and Cape Nature identified the need to allow for modernization, alignment in the strategic framework and Provincial Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, and to incorporate the Western Cape Biodiversity Reserve Act 2011 and its proposed amendments, which will also allow the bill to repeal this legislation. Honourable Speaker, the bill will also repeal the assigned provisions of the Mountain Catchment Areas Act 1970 and thereby modernize the protection of mountain catchment areas, which themselves house important ecosystems and which deliver essential water provisioning services to the province. Honourable Speaker, the process of drafting, vetting and refinement has been an intensive process within the Department and Cape Nature, expertly supported by the Department of the Premier and Legal Services, and we can just thank all the experts for their hours and hours of work. The draft bill was published for comment on the 7th of May 2019, with 8th of July 2019 set as the closing date for submissions and comments. The closing date was extended to 7th of August 2019. Comments were received from 186 commentators. These comments were considered by the Department and Cape Nature and the Department of the Premier Legal Services, and were appropriately amendments were made to the draft bill. The bill was then finalized for introduction in the Provincial Parliament. I submitted the bill to the Speaker's Office 22 December 2020. Thereafter, the bill was published by the Western Cape Parliament on 10th of May 2021 with a commenting period of 1 month. A third advertising and commenting period commenced in July 2021 with the closing date 10th August 2021. Over the past 6 months, the Standing Committee on Agriculture Affairs, Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning has undertaken their due diligence in the detailed discussion and consideration of comments on the bill. Honourable Speaker, the Standing Committee unanimously supported the proposed amendments resulting from the comment period and the deliberation. Thus, Honourable Speaker and members, the Western Cape Biodiversity Bill presented to this House with the confidence that it not only provides for the framework and institutions of nature conservation and the protection, management and sustainable use of biodiversity and ecosystems in the province, but that it provides the robust legal basis for our long-term ecological sustainability and climate resilience in the province. Thus, I move for the finalization of this bill. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable members, I now recognize the Honourable Member Maran.
Thanks, Speaker, and good afternoon to everyone present. Speaker, Premier, Leader of the official opposition, and other members present. Climate change and protecting the environment remains one of the most principal tasks of our generation. At the recently held COP26 energy session in Scotland, President Ramaphosa said, and I quote, "There is no longer any doubt that climate change presents a critical and urgent threat to humanity. This is so because it will have devastating consequences for our economies and societies if we don't take action now." Quote end. Our province in particular, both in respect of wildfires as well as the drought, knows too well the integral importance that addressing issues of climate change and the environment play. Climate change and the protection of the environment does not only affect sectors such as agriculture and tourism, but certainly must also be understood within the context of security and human development. As the Biodiversity and Coastal Management Director was quoted as saying recently, the bill we debate here today is to ensure human well-being and the long-term resilience of society and the economy through the conservation and protected areas. The purpose of this bill is to provide for a framework and institutions for nature conservation and the protection, management and sustainable use of biodiversity and ecosystems in the province, and for that matters related to these. The bill seeks to repeal in excess of 8 pieces of legislation, and most importantly, it will be regulating the Western Cape Nature Conservation Board. Speaker, the ANC wishes to take this opportunity to encourage those organizations, such as Cape Nature, to promote and educate the public of the Western Cape about the importance of protecting the environment. It is important that while our communities are educated about the environment, biodiversity and nature conservation, our communities must be also given the opportunity to visit such nature reserves in particular. We welcome the initiatives taken by Cape Nature during December, Tourism Month, to grant free access to its nature reserves for a week. Indeed, our nature reserves are our heritage, and we must promote and educate our communities and children about the importance of preserving our nature reserves and environment. Only recently did we hear of the 1,138 stakeholder learning activities conducted by Cape Nature. We must commend Cape Nature for their attempt to influence behavioral change towards understanding biodiversity in the Western Cape through environmental awareness and education and capacity building activities. We also commend Cape Nature for exceeding their target of number of hectares in the conservation estate, adding an extra 7,000 hectares in the last financial year. Added to this was the 7 biodiversity stewardship sites declared. While the bill may be welcome, it is the ANC's considered view that the Constitution of the Western Cape provides for an environmental commissioner. The ANC is emphatic that such competencies as addressed in this bill must be within the purview and competency of the environmental commissioner. Section 71 of the Provincial Constitution reads, in the exercise of his or her powers and functions of the Commissioner, must ensure the conservation of the environment in the Western Cape, and must give attention to the need to balance the goals of environmental conservation as sustainable development. Close quote. Speaker, the ANC calls on the DA provincial-led government to establish the office of the Commissioner for the Environment. Only a year ago, the DA was opposing the Commissioner for Children, and today he claims the Commissioner as their victory. Yet it took the ANC and many civil society organizations to fight the DA on matters of the Children's Commissioner. We shall do so for the Environmental Commissioner as well. We are made to believe that there were adequate legislation and regulations in place to satisfy the constitutional provisions of the Environmental Commissioner. Today, we are passing this bill as a response to that requirement for legislation to protect the environment in the Western Cape. In other words, we could simply be implementing the Environmental Commissioner. The reality, of course, is that the DA has lost popular support for ditching the constitutional clause, making provision for the establishment of an Environmental Commissioner. I wish to reiterate the words of our leader of the opposition, the Honourable Duckmore, when he said, open quote, all the public hearings have overwhelmingly come out in support of the retention of the post of Environmental Commissioner, while the submission made by the former DA chief whip in the provincial legislature, Mark Wiley, coming out against the amendment, shows just how out of touch this DA caucus is with its membership. Close quote. Speaker, the ANC hope that this piece of legislation considered here today is not an attempt to cover up or shelve the constitutional provision for the establishment of the Environmental Commissioner. Even more so, we patiently await the report of the fire that in Gulf Table Mountain earlier this year, and which was partly due to the alleged negligence of the city of Cape Town in not responding fast enough. However, we shall await the report from the city to determine whether the emergency services responded to the fire was adequate. Speaker, although the ANC is not against this bill, we will continue calling on this DA-led administration to abandon its attempts to amend the provincial constitution and to establish the Environmental Commissioner without any delay. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Maran. Honorable members, I now recognize the Honorable Member Murray.
Did you say Murray, Premier? I mean, Speaker?
The Honorable Member Murray, FF Plus, Menier.
Thank you. Yes, first of all, I think this bill is overdue and we should welcome it. I just hope it went far enough to protect our underground water reserves. We normally just look at the rural areas and protected areas, but in the cities itself, you have huge expanse of land where people have informal settlements without the bluesing facilities. So they are left to do what comes naturally in the open fields. And when it rains, there's seepage. There's seepage of whatever lies on top of the land into our underground water reserves, polluting it. And I would like to see that the Environment Commissioner, we should stay, and I support the previous speaker. It is a mad idea of the ruling party in the Western Cape to want to do away with an Environmental Commissioner. And as far as my party is concerned, we will fight it all the way. That instead of
you had a minute, so I've given you grace, but it's taking beyond my ability. So I want to thank you, Honorable Murray.
Thank you, Speaker. I would have been in time if I didn't touch on the DA, but thank you.
Next time. Thank you, Honorable Murray. I now recognize Honorable Brinkes, Honorable members.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Speaker, the Al-Jama Party is concerned about the delayed tactics by the Western Cape legislature to implement the objectives of the bill. These deliberate delays affect the protection and conservation of the province environment and failure to take action to stop sewage spills into the sea. These delays are not safeguarding the well-being of people, the long-term resilience of society and the economy through the conservation of protected areas. There are areas in Makassar and in Strand where residents still face problems with sewage-infested canals and rivers. We call on the legislator to take more stringent action against those municipalities who are polluting the waterways and harming the environment. Where are the law enforcement agencies and why has no action been taken against these municipalities? The appointment of an environmental commissioner is of utmost importance if we want to succeed in protecting our waterways and conservation of protected areas. Al-Jamaa supports the bill but calls for the swift action against those guilty of contravening the Biodiversity in NEMA Act.
You, Honorable Frankes, your time is up. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Honorable members, I now recognize the chairperson of the Standing Committee, Honorable Van der Westhuizen.
Agbare speaker, agbare lede, beide in die huis en diegene wat aanlyn inskakel. Dit is my besonder aangenaam om vandag as voorsitter van die staande komitee op landbou, omgewingsake en ontwikkelingsbeplanning ter ondersteuning van die Wes-Kaap se eie wetsontwerp op biodiversiteit, wetsontwerp B2B van 2021 te praat. Ek is ook dankbaar dat die wetsontwerp in die komitee stadium en ook vandag hier in die huis eenparig deur al die partye aanvaar is. Dit is vir my 'n riem onder die hart dat ons almal die omgewing en natuurbewaring as sulke belangrike sake beskou en dat ons oor politieke partytjie-grense heen kan saamstem oor so 'n belangrike onderwerp. Minister Bredel het in sy openingsrede aangedui hoe uniek die Wes-Kaap in terme van biodiversiteit is, hoe ryklik ons geseënd is met 'n verskeidenheid van plantspesies in 'n relatief klein omgewing. Hy het ook verwys na die verantwoordelikheid wat hierdie rykdom aan verskeidenheid op ons as verteenwoordigers van die Wes-Kaapse inwoners plaas. Ongelukkig is dit ook so dat die name van talle van ons plant- en dierspesies ook op die internasionale sogenaamde rooi datalys verskyn. En om redes wat ek nie altyd verstaan nie, is dat dan juist diegene wat hulle daarop toespits om hierdie skaars plante en diere op onwettige maniere uit die natuur te verwyder en daarmee te smokkel. Daar rus dus 'n groot verantwoordelikheid op ons as provinsiale regering om hierdie unieke bates te beskerm. Maar hierdie verantwoordelikheid is nie net 'n las op ons skouers nie. Die verantwoordelikheid om te sorg vir hierdie besondere, unieke blommeryk bied ook baie geleenthede. Daar's maniere om op volhoubare wyse die plante te benut. Ons plante wat aangepas is vir die uiterstes van ons klimaat, bied skaduwee in die warm somermaande en skuiling teen snerpende koue in die winters. Sommige plante is gesog vir hulle medisinale eienskappe en moet daarom op volhoubare wyse benut word. Ander plante speel 'n belangrike rol om grond te stabiliseer, om in ons bergopvanggebiede water terug te hou vir die droë tye en lewer 'n bydrae tot die voorsiening van skoon water vir mens en dier. Die besondere biodiversiteit van die Wes-Kaap hang ook nou saam met ons unieke geografie en die geologie van ons provinsie. Ons provinsie word gekenmerk deur 'n hoofsaaklik ruwe kuslyn, die pragtige Bolandse en Suid-Kaapse berge, maar ook die Sandveld en die Karoo met hulle unieke bekorings. En deels danksy ons topografie is daar nog heelwat natuurgebiede wat relatief onversteur is. Dit, tesame met ons wonderlike, doch soms uitdagende klimaat, skep 'n groot aantrekkingskrag vir besoekers aan die Wes-Kaap. En gelukkig is verantwoordelike toerisme 'n volhoubare bedryf. Dit is belangrik dat beide inwoners en toeriste toenemend meer sal leer watter waarde ons biodiversiteit het. Soos die kennis lui, kennis maak mag, maar ook onbekend maak onbemind. Ons het dus 'n groot verantwoordelikheid om kennis oor te dra en om respek vir ons biodiversiteit te kweek. Hierdie verantwoordelikheid is egter nie net die taak van die verskillende regeringssfere nie. En gelukkig is daar 'n toenemende besef, ook by privaat grondeienaars, dat ons almal 'n verantwoordelikheid teenoor die natuur het. Die toenemende besef van die belangrike rolle wat bewaring, biodiversiteit en volhoubaarheid speel, het die afgelope jare gelei tot verskeie ontwikkelings. Dit sluit in dat daar ook verskeie wette op nasionale vlak aanvaar is. Alle aanduidings is dat die nasionale departement verantwoordelik vir die omgewing ook verdere wetswysigings binne die afsienbare toekoms beoog. Die wetsontwerp wat vandag voor u dien, erken die belangrikheid en die rol van nasionale wetgewing en probeer om in simbiose met nasionale wetgewing te funksioneer. Ek deel graag met u 'n aantal aspekte wat deur hierdie wetsontwerp vandag voor die huis gedek word. Klousule 5 van hierdie wetsontwerp verplig alle staatsentiteite wat aksies wil neem wat biodiversiteit of die omgewing kan skaad, om 'n langtermyn perspektief te handhaaf en om ekologiese volhoubaarheid na te streef.
Van the best reason. The noise comes from your side. So whatever it is, if you could help us, it is not anywhere other than from your device, that side. So I just thought I must draw your attention and the attention of the honorable members. You may proceed, Honorable Van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chair. Klousule 6 bepaal die beginsels waarvolgens dit moet geskied. Klousule 7 en 8 spel die verpligtinge van die verantwoordelike provinsiale minister en die hoof van die departement uit. Klousules 9 tot 33 bevat die wetsbepalinge wat in die toekoms van toepassing sal wees op die Wes-Kaapse Natuurbewaringsraad, oftewel Cape Nature. In hierdie klousules vind u die pligte en magte van die organisasie, insluitend die bepalinge wat die raad se samestelling, termyn en funksionering rig. Ervaring op nasionale vlak het geleer dat sommige vakatures op rade baie lank neem om gevul te word. Waarskynlik omdat ons via die Sonderkommissie geleer het, dat sommige ministers eers met hul party se sogenaamde ontplooiingskomitee moet skakel voordat hulle mense vir rade mag benoem. Ons het dus voorsiening gemaak dat die raad sy eie waarnemende voorsitter kan aanwys, sou 'n minister in die toekoms sloer met die aanwysing van 'n voorsitter of ondervoorsitter vir die raad. Maar mag die Wes-Kaap tog gespaar word dat so 'n politieke party weer in beheer kom. Die voorgestelde wet vereis ook dat daar binne 12 maande 'n konsep ruimtelike biodiversiteitplan vir die provinsie opgestel sal word en dat hierdie plan elke 5 jaar hersien moet word. Die wetsontwerp bepaal ook die doel, inhoud en gebruik van hierdie plan. Cape Nature moet ook binne 2 jaar na die inwerkingtreding van hierdie wet 'n konsep uitbreidingsstrategie vir provinsiale beskermde gebiede opstel. Daar word dus gehoop dat ons in die toekoms 'n uitbreiding van bewaringsgebiede sal sien. Die wetsontwerp maak ook voorsiening vir die verklaring en wysiging van bergopvangsgebiede, ook ten opsigte van grond in privaat besit, en dat die minister kan bepaal watter aktiwiteite binne hierdie belangrike areas toegelaat of verbied sal word. 'n Wonderlike ontwikkeling wat ons oor die afgelope aantal jare gesien het, is die uitbreiding van vennootskappe tussen die staat en private grondgebruikers wanneer dit by bewaring kom. Hierdie wetsontwerp maak daarvoor voorsiening dat hierdie vennootskappe, genoem biodiversiteitsopsigterskapgebiede, verskillende vorme kan aanneem. Hierdie wetsontwerp maak ook voorsiening vir die verklaring en wysiging van UNESCO biosfeerreservate in die Wes-Kaap. Die Wes-Kaap is in Suid-Afrika die leier in terme van die UNESCO Mens en die Biosfeerprogram. Hierdie program dra by tot die belangrike internasionale erkenning vir ons unieke bewaringsgebiede. Die wetsontwerp bepaal ook dat die minister met die instemming van die nasionale minister sekere sensitiewe ekostelsels as sulks kan verklaar. Die minister kan ook lyste publiseer van sensitiewe, bedreigde en kritiek bedreigde spesies en beperkings plaas op aktiwiteite met eksemplare van hierdie spesies. Om te verseker dat hierdie regulasies nagekom word, word daar bepaalde bevoegdhede en pligte aan natuurbewaringsbeamptes verleen en opgedra. Hierdie bevoegdhede sluit in die beslaglegging op eksemplare en voertuie van persone wat daarvan verdink word dat hulle regulasies oortree het. Die wetsontwerp stel dan ook vereistes daar waaraan sulke wetstoepassers moet voldoen, ten einde misbruik van hierdie magte te beperk. Lede van die publiek met 'n besondere passie vir natuurbewaring sal geïnteresseerd wees in die bepalings ten opsigte van ere natuurbewaringsamptenare. Die wetsontwerp maak ook voorsiening vir strawwe wat opgelê kan word, sou regulasies oortree word. Persone wat te nagekom voel kan onder bepaalde omstandighede, soos in die wetsontwerp uitgespel, hulle appelle rig tot die hoofuitvoerende beampte van Cape Nature en die provinsiale minister. Dit dan in kort waaroor hierdie wetsontwerp handel. Agbare spreker, laat ek net vinnig verwys na die brande teen Tafelberg. Ek dink dat die agbare Maran is daarvan bewus dat Tafelberg onder sandparke val. Sandparke is 'n entiteit van die nasionale regering. En die beveiliging van Tafelberg en die Tafelberg Natuurreservaat teen brande is dus die verantwoordelikheid van 'n grondeienaar, oftewel in hierdie geval die nasionale regering. Dit is duidelik dat SANParks sy verantwoordelikhede ten opsigte van brande en die veiligheid van besoekers verbeur en versaak. En dis daarom dat die agbare Maran uiteindelik na die stad Kaapstad kyk en kyk wat sy hulp stad Kaapstad gelewer het tydens die brande wat Tafelberg verlede seisoen getuister het. En agbare Brinkhuis, in terme van die besoedeling wat veroorsaak word deur mense wat ons rioolstelsels misbruik. Ek wil hoop dat u ook, wanneer u met die publiek skakel, 'n opvoedingstaak sal uitvoer en mense sal leer en sal help om net dit wat wel in stormwaterstelsels en in rioolstelsels hanteer kan word, in daardie stelsels te stort. Ons het inderdaad 'n ernstige probleem in daardie opsig. En daar is 'n groot opvoedingstaak en ek glo dat ons almal as gemeenskapsleiers daardie taak te alle tye moet nakom. Ter afsluiting wil ek graag 'n aantal persone bedank sonder wie se entoesiasme en harde werk ons nie vandag hierdie wetsontwerp ter tafel sou kon neem nie. Soos wat minister Bradel aangedui het, word die ontstaan van hierdie wetsontwerp teruggevoer na selfs 5 jaar voordat hierdie parlement in 2019 verkies is. Ek wil graag hulde bring aan hulle wat die fondamente gelê het en hulle van harte bedank. Baie dankie aan die lede van die publiek en ander staatsinstansies, insluitende die Nasionale Departement van Omgewingsake, wat waardevolle insette gelewer het. Al het die Nasionale Departement eers lank na die sluitingsdatum gereageer, was die vertragings wat dit veroorsaak het, deur die komitee hanteer, soveel so dat ons tog vandag aan die doel wat ons vir onsself gestel het om hierdie wet voor die einde van die jaar te finaliseer, kon voldoen. U het verneem hoe ver terug daaraan hierdie dokument begin werk is en dat omgewingswetgewing 'n baie dinamiese onderwerp is. Ek het daarom groot waardering vir die lede van die komitee en amptenare wat aangedui het dat hulle almal bereid sou wees om hulle programme aan te pas en selfs na ure te vergader in 'n poging om hierdie voorgestelde wetsontwerp se prosesering te versnel en voor die einde van die parlementêre jaar vir finale oorweging gereed te kry. Baie dankie aan die Departement van Omgewingsake en Ontwikkelingsbeplanning onder leiding van meneer Piet van Sail. Meneer van Sail tree binnekort af en ek glo dat hierdie wetsontwerp sal uitstaan as een van die mylpale wat in sy termyn bereik is. Ek vermeld ook graag die rol van Cape Nature en sy uitvoerende hoof Dr. Azina Omar. 'n Besondere woord van dank aan mekaar in Shippy, maar veral aan Marlene Laros en ander wat die wye verskeidenheid van insette wat ontvang is noukeurig opgesom en aangebied het. Waardevolle ondersteuning is ook verleer deur meneer Lionel van der Schuyf van die departement van die premier. Ek wil ook graag hulde bring en alle eer gee aan ons minister Anton Bradel, wat so 'n passie vir die omgewing het en sonder wie se dryf hierdie wetsontwerp ook nooit na hierdie parlement toe verwys sou gewees het nie. En laastens vermeld ek graag die onmisbare rol van ons parlementêre ondersteuningspersoneel en veral die rol van Mesherine Niekerk, ons prosedurele amptenaar en ondersteuner van die komitee. Sy het agter die skerms hard gewerk om te verseker dat ons vandag 'n produk voor ons kan hê waarop ons as parlement met reg trots kan wees. Agbare spreker, lede, ek het dus groot vrymoedigheid om u ondersteuning vir hierdie belangrike wetsontwerp te vra. Ek dank u.
Baie dankie, agbare van der Westhuizen. Honourable members, I now recognize the Honourable Minister.
Chairperson, thank you. And again, just from my side, thank you to the Chairperson and the committee for their efforts and hard work to get us to the stage today. I think all that's left for me is therefore to move for the finalisation of this bill. I put it to this House. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable members, that concludes the debate on the consideration of the principle and finalization of the bill. Are there any objections to the approval of the principle and finalization of the bill? No objections. Thank you very much, honorable members. The secretary will read the bill.
Consideration of the report of the state. No.
Read the bill. Mr. Director.
Consideration and finalization. Western Cape Diversity Bill.
It's a biodiversity. I'm sure you are tired. Please read it properly, Mr. Stemel.
Western Cape Biodiversity Bill.
Thank you very much, sir. Honorable members, this bill has been agreed to unanimously, which marks a very good spirit for this day. Thank you very much to all the honorable members. The bill will be sent to the Premier for assent. I now ask the Secretary to read the third order of the day.
Consideration of report of the standing. Consideration of report of the Standing Committee on Local Government, Municipal Systems Amendment Bill, ratification of final mandate.
Right, the House has received the report of the Standing Committee on Local Government, on the Local Government Municipal Systems Amendment Bill, conferring authority on the Western Cape delegation in the NCOP to support this bill. This mandate has been sent to the NCOP. I will now afford parties an opportunity to make a declaration if they so wish. I recognize the ANC.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. We rise in support of the amendment to the Municipal Systems Bill. We believe that the bill is a clear indication of the strengthening of accountability in local government, the insistence that in regard to processes of appointment, both of municipal managers as well as those managers that report to the municipal managers is being improved and tightened and strengthened. And this, at the end of the day, can only result in more effective local government and the delivery of services. So from the ANC side, we want to support this. We also think that it's particularly important that we need to avoid situations that we are currently experiencing where, for instance, the Hesoko municipality has resolved to appoint a former MM that resigned under a cloud of allegations of sexual misconduct at the Mossel Bay municipality, and that the Hesoko municipality has now resolved to appoint that particular individual. We think that this amendment also seeks to avoid situations like that, and we trust that the MEC himself will make sure that he applies both the letter and the spirit of the law when considering that particular appointment. But from the ANC side, we believe this is a step in the right direction and we support it fully. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Doug Moore. Before, Honourable Members, I see that my microphone was off when I read the order. I just want to, for Hansard, just read so that we are covered, that this was the report from the Standing Committee on Local Government with regards to the Municipal Systems Amendment Bill, conferring authority on the Western Cape delegation in the NCOP to support this bill for the record. So this mandate has been sent to the NCOP. I will now recognize the EFF.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. The EFF holds the view that the bill is in its current state does not create job security for workers working in municipalities, such as security guards, cleaners, garden workers, and all the way up to managers reporting to the municipal manager. The employment regime envisaged by the bill will destabilize municipalities and also have a negative impact on service delivery, as there will always be uncertainty when it comes to the security of tenure. The EFF therefore rejects the bill. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. And now recognise Good. I take it that Good is not actually participating. I now recognise the ACDP.
No declaration.
Thank you very much. I now recognise the Freedom Front Plus. I take it no. And I recognise Al Jamaa.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Al Jamaa is in support of the bill. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much. I now recognise the Democratic Alliance.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Deputy Chair, the report table here today is purely academic. This process started way back in 2011. It finally was sort of agreed to by the committee on the 7th of September. But due to inordinate delays within the NCOP and amongst the ANC colleagues in the National Assembly, the intention of the bill and the impact it could have had in combating corruption and maladministration could have been avoided many years ago. Having said that, I think that we has a great deal of indebtedness to our department for making a number of recommendations that seek to improve the content of the bill, and many of those were accepted by the NCOP. However, there are shortcomings that need to be tightened up in future, but we believe that the context in which we find ourselves, that it is a step in the right direction, and certainly we will improve the caliber and the quality of people that we appoint in senior management positions in municipalities. The bill was finally agreed to yesterday in the NCOP, and it's been sent to the President for assent, I suppose. But I want to deal with one particular clause that was that's important in a sense that where people are being charged with misconduct and that's being found guilty for financial misconduct within municipalities, that the blacklist will be sort of compiled by the minister, and that there's a provision on the reappointment of such people. Where a person is alleged to have committed misconduct and the disciplinary process has not run its course, then certainly that person is considered as not guilty of the particular misconduct, but that particular person's name will also be sort of registered against the register of people who ought to have been who absconded from a misconduct hearing. In the case of the Esequa incident that the leader of the opposition referred to my knowledge, that the individual referred to had not been charged with any misconduct of any sorts, and therefore we must respect the process of natural justice and equality before the law, and cannot. Anyway, thank you, Chair. We support the report and the mandate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stamela, I have to announce there are how many members present here today for the record? 36. I have to announce that there are currently 36 members, honourable members present and entitled to vote, and the House is therefore quorate. The question put before the House that the report of the Standing Committee Local Government on the Local Government's Municipal Systems Amendment Bill conferring authority on the Western Cape delegation in the NCOP to support this bill be ratified and adopted. We note the objections of those parties and the abstentions of parties for the record. The report, therefore, the report of the Standing Committee on Local Government Municipal Systems Amendment Bill has therefore been adopted. I thank you. The Secretary, Mr. Stamela, apologies, Mr. Stamela, will you please read the fourth order of the day?
Consideration of report of the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning on the National Forest Amendment Bill, ratification of final mandate.
Thank you very much. The House received the report of the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning on the National Forests Amendment Bill, conferring authority on the Western Cape delegation in the NCOP to support this bill. This mandate has been sent to the NCOP. I will now afford parties an opportunity to make a declaration if they so wish. I recognize the ANC.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker.
Sorry.
Deputy Speaker, the ANC, I rise on behalf of the ANC to support the National Forest Amendment Bill. Amongst others, the bill seeks to advance the sustainable management and development of forests, guarantee the protection of certain forests and trees, provide clearer definitions, for example, of national forests and woodlands, make provision for public trusteeship of the nation's forestry resources, advocate the promotion and enforcement of sustainable forest management, and put measures in place to control and remedy for deforestation. Again, as I mentioned earlier, with the Provincial Biodiversity Bill, the ANC views this bill as another cog in the wheel of ensuring that the environment, in particular our forests, are protected. Yet even more so, the need for an environmental commissioner. Our country is said to have nearly 10 million hectares of forest. The forestry industry, on the other hand, is said to be a major contributor to the economy. Commercial plantations in the Western Cape are reported to be in the region of over 43,000 hectares. It is therefore important for a balanced act to be done in this regard, with ensuring the protection of the environment on the one hand and the promotion of the sustainable livelihoods of our people, dependent on the forestry industry and on the other. Another important aspect that was certainly by the ANC in National Parliament was the important role played by stakeholders and traditional leaders in particular. Consideration must go into ensuring that these, together with women, people with disabilities, and young people, are given the opportunity to participate in the governance of forests. While we must promote reforestation, we must advocate for just and sustainable solutions to communities, especially poor communities affected by the promotion of projects of reforestation. In this regard, the bill must also be seen as means to develop our rural areas and to ensure the development of people in the rural areas. Again, Speaker, the ANC support this bill. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Moran. I now recognise the EFF.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The bill under consideration does not make provision for the reversal of partial privatization of forestry resources, which started to be leased out from the South African Forestry Company Limited, which is SAFCO, since 1998 to white-owned companies which continue to exploit them without due regard to the environment and communities who reside around these forests. Therefore, the EFF will reject the bill. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you very much. I recognise Good. I assume he's not on. I then recognise the ACDP. Right, abstaining. I recognise the Freedom Front Plus.
Abstain.
Thank you very much. I recognise Al Jamaa.
Al Jamaa, we are for the bill, Speaker.
Noted, thank you. And I recognize the Democratic Alliance.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, honourable members, the National Forest Act, Act 85 of 1998, have seen a number of amendments since its first enactment. Natural forests and woodlands form an important part of our environment, the very same environment that we need to protect for present and future generations. Plantation forests play an important part in the economy. During the previous millennium, the state played an important role in forestry, but that role has seen significant changes, and I want to come back to that. For centuries, natural forests were harvested for short-term economic benefit. In many areas, this led to deforestation, resulting in irreparable harm. There's now a recognition that our remaining natural forests need to be protected. The National Forest Act provides for the declaration of protected areas and even protected trees. Forests also serve as important areas for recreation, education, cultural events, and spiritual fulfillment. It was, however, found that the definitions of what constitutes a natural forest and woodland needed to be revised. It was also found that the National Minister required stronger and swifter actions in those cases where the conditions regarding natural forests were breached. The amendment bill also proposed that in cases where the urgency of the situation required swift action, that the Minister may first declare certain forest areas as controlled forest areas and only thereafter embark on consultations and hearings. The amendment bill, as circulated to provinces, also included the prohibition on any new prospecting and mining activities in state forests, except where allowed to in terms of applicable legislation. The amendment bill also made provision for first the right to appeal against any decision by a departmental official, and secondly, for the establishment of an appeal board as constituted and nominated by the responsible national minister. It may be of interest to members, and particularly our Minister of Transport, that the Select Committee in the NCOP proposed an amendment to the prohibition on mining in state forests. In the Amendment Bill version B11D, they allow for the mining of gravel and sand for road maintenance. Die ANC praat van die ontwikkeling van gemeenskappe in ons plattelandse areas en veral die naby ons plantasies. Maar agbare adjunk speaker, dit is vir my baie jammer dat ons vorige bosbougemeenskappe, mense in die sogenaamde bosdorpe, soos 'n warm patat gelos is deur die ANC regering. Daardie aktiwiteite, daardie bosdorpe, daardie mense wat vroeër gewerk het op die departement van bosbou, is vandag werkloos en word nie voorgesorg nie. En ek wil regtig vra dat as ons ANC-lede enige invloed het, dat hulle daarmee vir ons sal help. The Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning recommended that the House confers on the Western Cape's delegation in the NCOP the authorities to support the amendment bill, and I move that the report be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. And Honourable Member, just watch your mic. I'm not sure if you moving and causing interruption. If you hear a playback, you'll hear that you were not very clear, and maybe you could just check what's happening with your microphone. Thank you very much. I have to announce that there are currently 34 honourable members present and entitled to vote, and the House is therefore quorate. The question put before the House that the report of the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning on the National Forests Amendment Bill conferring authority on the Western Cape delegation in the NCOP to support this bill be ratified and adopted. The objections will be noted and the abstentions too. The report of the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and the Development Planning on the National Forests Amendment Bill has therefore been adopted. Thank you very much. Mr. Stamela, will you read the fifth order of the day, please?
Consideration of report of the Standing Committee on Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism on the recommendation for the appointment of candidates to the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Board dated 8th September 2021.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stamela. I've been informed by the Chief Whip that the Programming Authority resolved that there would be no list of speakers and that the parties who wish to do so will now be afforded an opportunity to make a declaration of the vote for a maximum of 3 minutes. I recognize the ANC.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The ANC supports this report for adoption by the House. In particular, we wish to once again reiterate our standpoint to support womb power, womb leadership, and womb excellence as epitomized by the likes of Charlotte Manya Makeke to secure and as leadership of women in general and Black women in particular cannot continue to be delayed, particularly in the growing and critical sectors of our economy with such impact in the lives of our communities, such as the Gambling and Racing Board. In doing so, topping on the list of recommended candidates as the ANC, we wish to applaud and give extra recognition to Ms. Lebogang Mukhabudi, her leadership in the financial sector, but more importantly, being described as a woman who is committed to building Africa. She has led in financial services in countries such as Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Pakistan, Nepal, and Azerbaijan. Ms. Mukhabudi is also said to be passionate about the use of fintech for social impact and development finance services for smallholders, farmers in Kenya and Ghana. The latest annual report of the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Board states, and I quote, "The board's mandate is to regulate the gambling industry through the licensing of suitable qualifying persons and entities to conduct gambling and racing in the province and to ensure the industry's compliance with the national and provincial gambling legislation. Through the licensing process, the board gives effect to economic transformation and broad-based empowerment, which are government priorities at national and provincial level. It is, however, imperative for the board to ensure that in granting of economic rights and opportunities, effective and appropriate measures are in place to ensure fair play and that the harms and dangers of gambling is minimized," close quote. Deputy Speaker, the ANC finds it necessary to re-emphasize the need for our provincial economy to be integrated and to give effect to economic transformation and broad-based empowerment and participation, as the annual report states. We hope that the board will continue to effect the granting of economic rights and opportunities, effective and appropriate measures to be in place so that our gambling and racing board continue to be a successful and well-governed entity. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Mkondlo. I now recognize the EFF.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. We abstain. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you. I'm going to ask Good for the record. I assume not here. Okay. Abstaining. ACDP. Abstaining. Freedom Front Plus.
Abstaining.
Noted. Thank you. Al Jamal.
Abstaining, Speaker.
Noted. Thank you. The Democratic Alliance.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, on the report of the Standing Committee on Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism on the recommendation of the appointment of the candidates to the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Board is informed by Section 3, Subsection 1 of the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Act, Act 4 of 1996, as amended. The matter of vacancies in the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Board was referred to the committee on 3 August 2021 by the Office of the Speaker in terms of the ATC as received by the Provincial Minister of Finance. Provincial Treasury informed the committee that there was one vacancy that needed to be filled, and this vacancy came about 1 February 2021. The Provincial Treasury advertised the vacant board member position as in the Provincial Gazette, the Burger, Weekend Argus, and Vukani on 12, 13, and 18 February 2021. On 1 September 2021, Provincial Treasury briefed the committee on the process leading to the shortlisting of the candidates, as is their mandate in terms of the Act. The committee was provided then with a list of the 4 candidates to evaluate, and the committee unanimously resolved to evaluate the candidates through an interview process. Further, the committee, having interviewed the candidates, recommended unanimously all 4 candidates to the Minister, ranked in order of highest preference. And Deputy Speaker, if you would allow, the names are listed in the ATC, but I'm not too sure in terms of the POPI recommendations. So I'm not going to be reading the names out in the House, but the ATC is public and it is listed in order. The committee further was unanimous in the submission, the ranking, and the adoption of the report. Speaker, I would like to congratulate and thank the Provincial Treasury on this round of shortlisting. The committee last year made recommendations on the procedure of the Provincial Treasury, and not only did they listen, but they implemented these processes within its shortlisting process. I would also like to thank the members of the committee for ensuring the swift but meaningful participation during this process, and we hope that our recommendations will assist the Minister and Provincial Executive with their decision in this matter. On 1 September 2021, as you may know, the committee then resolved to submit also our score sheets to the Minister should he need assistance in understanding the reasons for our respective rankings. Deputy Speaker, I request that the report now be considered, and I lobby for the support of the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I have to announce that there are currently 34 Honourable Members present and entitled to vote, and the House is therefore quorate. This House also notes the abstentions. The question put before the House is that the report of the Standing Committee on Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism be adopted as per the abstentions and the support. I therefore declare it adopted. Thank you very much. Before we adjourn, Honourable Members, I would like to inform the members that the CPA General Meeting will commence immediately after adjournment of the House. Please note that on Thursday, the 9th of December and Friday, the 10th of December 2021, the proceedings will commence at 10:00 hours. This concludes the business for the day. Mr. Stamela will now end the meeting and all the members will be exited from the sitting. The House is adjourned.